10 seconds.
Is this where the damn drumming and the music kicks in?
Yeah. Just like that, another race weekend has come and gone. Another week has flown by, and we are sitting here on Tuesday night, March the 17th, 2020. Welcome, everybody, to On the Pipe Podcast. I am your host, as always, Tyler Shepardson, and this is the brand new episode of OTP Tuesday, where we recap what happened over the weekend in the world of off-road racing, and we have a great show coming at you guys tonight. I'm really excited to get it started. I'm really excited to bring it to you all, and I'm really excited that you all tuned in to listen. Just to give you a quick rundown of the show, we're going to go over what happened this past weekend at the GNCC. A lot of storylines to talk about, some history made, and some new winners on the weekend, some same winners on the weekend, a lot of stuff that we have to talk about there. And then we're going to get to our guests of the evening, and I'm really excited about both of these. They both turned out to be awesome interviews. We're going to have Mackenzie Tricker, WXC Pro Women's Rider, the reigning National Enduro Women's Elite Champion, former ISDE World Champion, former Loretta's Champion, former all sorts of Australian championships in motocross. She joins us, talks about this past weekend and a couple other random off-topic stuff that we got into, but then we are going to be joined by, I guess you could say, Yamaha's Jason Rains. He's got a lot to do with Yamaha. He runs the Yamaha Demo Ride Days, so he loads up the rig, 12 bikes across Yamaha's lineup of motorcycles, ATVs, and I think even side-by-sides. He travels the country for a living and goes out and provides those opportunities for you to ride whatever Yamaha you might have your eyes on before you go spend $1 gajillion and buy one. So really cool program that he's got going on there. We actually find out how it got started in the process of all this, which I didn't know before the show. So a lot of cool information from Jason Rains. Jason Rains is a legend. He's been around since the late 90s, racing XC1, has a bunch of XC1 victories, very close to an XC1 championship. We talk about that in the interview as well. And he is also a current XC3 competitor, racing a 125 at the GNCCs, where he, just so happened to get a win, a whole shot this past weekend, and it was really cool. But I mean, the guy's a wealth of knowledge. I actually had a very good time talking to him. We talked on the phone for about 40 minutes before the interview even started, and then we got a interview talking about all sorts of stuff, from bench racing stories from back in the day to kind of how GNCC has changed throughout the years, to how he's now helping his daughter Preston climb the women's amateur ranks and wrap up championships of her own. And then we also talked to him about the race this past weekend and all sorts of other stuff. So it was a really interesting interview with Jason Rains. That will be coming at you as well. And like I said before that, we have Mackenzie Tricker. But for now, let's get into the race weekend. There was so much going on, so much happening this past weekend. And first and foremost, I want to say a big thank you to our buddies over at Armored Graphics. You can check them out, armoredgraphics.com, or on the social medias at Armored Graphics, on Instagram, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. I've been talking to them, and it's about time for an Armored Graphics resurgence. There was a time a couple years ago that when you went to any woods race in the Carolinas, I swear, it was like 9 out of 10 bikes had armored graphics on it, and that might be coming back at you. They're going to put a big push in it. So as always, make sure you're checking them out. Use promo code OTP. Let them know you're a listener. Their website's going to be back up soon, but promo code OTP is going to be good for 15% off. Just make sure you tell them that up front, so don't wait until the very end. Tell them up front. Let them know what you got going on, and they will hook you up because they are longtime sponsors and really good friends of the show. With that being said, we had a Sear Riders Enduro, Hard Enduro, the Groundhog Hard Enduro. It took place at Rock Crusher Farms. So Rock Crusher Farms is right on the border. Literally half of the place is in North Carolina, and the other half is in Georgia. It's an awesome piece of property. They got a lot of stuff going on. We raced a full gas there last year. They did the hard enduro here this past weekend, and full gas timing and scoring actually did the scoring for the event. I was able to see the scoring. I was able to see the results. I have not been able to talk to anybody to figure out how the race went or how gnarly it got or really too much information about the race, but Nick Farringer, who is no stranger to the hard enduro events. He goes out there, he gets the win, followed by Quinn Wenzel, who I understand made up a lot of time there towards the end of the race, but ends up in second place there was Quinn Wenzel. And rounding out your Groundhog hard enduro podium was Chuck DeLulo. So solid podium and a solid effort there. I've seen a bunch of pictures from the race, and it looked gnarly. I saw everyone stuck on a hill trying to make it up. Haven't seen much video, and like I said, I apologize. I don't know the backstories and the ins and outs of what happened at the Groundhog Hard Enduro down there that Sear Riders put on, but I know that those were your top 3 riders, and I know that Corey Buttrick, CB121, he was out there on a KTM 2-stroke. He was competing, having a good time. He's coming fresh off of that knee surgery. Hopefully we can talk to him in the coming weeks. But, yeah, that's how everything shook down there. That being said, between the Sear Riders Hard Enduro and the GNCC that was at the General Aonia Pass MX in Washington, Georgia, might have been the only 2 sporting events going on in the entire nation. As you all are well aware, this coronavirus is it's not taking the world by storm. It's really not that bad, in my opinion. It's taking the media by storm. It's taking the frenzy of people by storm, and it's taking all of our economies and jobs and well-beings and livelihoods by storm. So pretty much everything got canceled. GNCC announced today that the round at Steel Creek that got postponed due to coronavirus, there's rumors that it was going back to Big Buck. Well, let me just go ahead and put it out there. It wasn't a rumor that they were going back to Big Buck. They posted an article on their own website written by their own people saying that they were moving it from Steel Creek to Big Buck. I found out over the weekend that after the decision was made to release that, the decision was quickly made to retract it, and I guess they just weren't ready to announce it, all for good reason, being that now it is just canceled. It is no longer postponed. It is canceled, so they're not going back to Big Buck. There's rumors they were going to maybe the old Cannonball track in Georgia. I heard they were going to Paradise in Georgia. Anyway, it's not happening. Because of this whole coronavirus thing, because of everyone shutting down these mass gatherings or events with more than 10 people or events with more than 100 people, it's kind of got everyone backed into a corner. So GNCC, they did announce that round originally scheduled to be in 2 weeks, I think? 3 weeks. It would have been in 3 weeks. That one is no more. They did announce that the makeup date will likely be at Loretta Lynn's at the original scheduled makeup date that they had, which was July, I want to say July 7th and 8th. I thought that I wrote it down. I did not write it down. If you'll bear with me and my rambling for 2.5 seconds here, I will give you the exact date just so you all know. So That event that was scheduled to be at Steel Creek and then rumored to be moved is now going to be the makeup day at Loretta Lynn's, and it looks like that date is going to fall on July 11th and 12th. So that will be the weekend before Loretta Lynn's Amateur National Motocross Championship, which MX Sports, they are the promoters of that as well, so they'll already be down there, which is why this works for them to go ahead and run it. So we'll still get 13 rounds, we'll still get to go racing, and even cooler, we'll get to go back to Loretta Lynn's Ranch and go GNCC racing, which I think is pretty cool. Also in the midst of this whole coronavirus thing, National Enduro, they were supposed to race this weekend in Texas. That has been postponed / canceled. Mid-East Hare Scrambles was supposed to race this weekend in Morganton, North Carolina. That has been postponed / canceled. Full Gas Sprint Enduro was supposed to race next weekend at NCMP in North Carolina over near Raleigh. That has been postponed / canceled. Pretty much everything that is fun to do has been canceled over this damn coronavirus. So it really stinks. It really it weighs a lot on a lot of people outside our sport especially, but even Mackenzie Tricker, talking to her, she got into it as well. This affects everybody. I mean, there's a ton of people that rely on these races for their livelihood. And it's not just the racers, which some of the racers are on salary. Some of the racers have jobs during the week and go racing, basically spending money to go racing. So they'll be saving a little bit of money. But there are also a group of in-betweeners that maybe aren't the full-fledged factory teams with factory money and factory contracts and factory salaries. They have to go out there and earn that money week to week, and that is the entire WXC class and a hefty list of XC1 and XC2 and XC3 competitors. So this really affects a lot of people, and it's not only just the riders relying on that income. A lot of the track crew that go and set up these tracks, that's what they do. I mean, these tracks don't get set up overnight. They're there from the weekend before, at the very latest, the Monday before the race, and they're there until the Wednesday or so after the race, cleaning up and also working at the race over the weekend. So you're talking about this is people's full-time job to go set up these tracks. It's people's full-time job to be the freelancers like Mason Rader. He's a freelancer. He relies on these races to go out and film for clients, film for all sorts of people. I mean, it affects so many people, not just in our sport, but restaurants are closing down. All those waitresses, they're without work. I mean, it's really interesting and strained times that we're going through right now, dealing with this whole coronavirus thing. So there's going to be a lot of people that get it. There's also going to be a lot of people that is going to fall on tough times because of this. So the best thing I can say is just help people in need. If you are able to help people, please do so. And if I can help any single one of you in any way possible, let me know. I'd be more than happy to help, because like I said, this is going to be tough on a lot of different people. So there's that. But yeah, speaking of that, obviously these shows, we do them every single Tuesday. We recap what's going on over the weekend. I also ask you bear with me in the coming weeks, because if there's not races, then there's not a whole lot to talk about. I've already reached out to some people that we're going to go and sit down and do live shows. I've also talked with a bunch of my buddies, and we got some plans and some ideas coming up. So no doubt about it, we will keep shows coming at you. Obviously, there won't be races to talk about each weekend, but we're going to find something to talk about, and we're going to find some way to keep it interesting. And I plan to hit the road and talk to some riders and do a little bit of riding with them, and then do a little bit of talking, and yeah, be on the lookout. We're going to have a lot of stuff coming at you, and it's going to be good. OTP is here to stay. We're here to grow. We're here to grow together, and I appreciate each and every single one of you and all the support that we've been getting lately. It's been pretty surreal. I think it's awesome, because I was checking the stats, and as of before I was recording this episode, there's been more downloads on the podcast already in 2020 than all of 2019 combined and all of 2018 combined. And I didn't run the math on it, but it's probably all of 2018 and 19 combined. Maybe. I don't know. That would be a stretch. It'd be close. By the time the next 1 or 2 episodes comes out, I can guarantee that it'll equal those two combined. Anyway, what I'm getting at is the show's growing. I hope you guys like what we're doing. I hope you all like these interviews and everything that we have going on and talking about the races and talking about current events and talking with different people and getting people involved. So I really appreciate you listening. And if you do like it, let a friend know about it. Subscribe to our channel. We are now putting everything up on YouTube as well. So these full shows will be going to YouTube. So if you're sitting at a desk and you'd rather listen to it on there, you absolutely can. And I'm also going to be breaking down interviews by themselves and putting those on YouTube as well. So by Wednesday or Thursday, you'll be able to go on there and listen to just the Mackenzie Tricker interview or just the Jason Rains interview or however you want to do it. So subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to it now. Subscribe to it on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram, all that good stuff. And now I'll stop plugging it because you don't want to hear me talk about that. You want to hear about racing. And there was a lot of stuff going on this past weekend. First and foremost, what we'll do is we'll do a quick rundown of the results and of the finishing order for our pro classes. Now, obviously, taking the win, once again, his third straight win of 2020. It was the number 1 FMF Red Bull Factory KTM of Caleb Russell, which I did some math on it. That was win number 63. So he got it right at the end. 3 turns left. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But I actually had the opportunity to commentate the race once again. So I was in the booth. So if you watched the live show and you heard a voice that sounded a little bit familiar, it was this voice that you're hearing right now. So it was pretty cool. I announced the WXC race in the morning, and then I was in the booth for the afternoon, and it was pretty cool, especially the build-up, the anticipation, the way that this XC1 race went, and XC2, and XC3. So I think between all of the pro classes, this may have been the best and most competitive GNCC in recent memory. The WXC riders were switching positions every single lap. The XC2 riders were switching positions every single lap. The XC1 riders were all over the place. They were going back and forth. And I also think that looking at the live show, this was the most race coverage on a GNCC live show that has ever been, because Nick Gross, the drone pilot for Racer TV, he did an awesome job, and they did an awesome job as a whole, setting it all up and getting that. They call it the Yamaha Skycam, but it's a DJI Mavic 2 Pro. I think it's a 2 Pro. It might be a 2 Zoom. Might be a Mavic 1. I don't know. Anyway, they have a drone, and because the leaves weren't on the trees yet, they're able to follow the riders through the woods. So we saw more passes and more line selections and more overall racing than I've ever seen at any of those GNCC live shows. And not even that. It's more than you can see in person. Even if you have the best spot on the track, you can only see him for a few seconds. They were following him. Nick Gross with that drone was following over top of these riders for like miles at a time. It was really cool. So if you didn't get a chance to check out the live show, I highly suggest you go back and check it out, because they also got the pass for the lead with 3 turns left to go when Caleb Russell got by Factory 1 Sherco's Stu Baylor Jr. At the very end of the race, Stu had to pit twice with a screw cap, didn't have a dry brake, and still led the majority of the race. Caleb got by him, Stu passed him back. Caleb got by him again, Stu passed him back again. Stu gapped him by 20 seconds 2 different times and had that race handled, showed that he was the fastest guy on the track for the majority of that race. All of a sudden, at the last part of the motocross track, which if you weren't there in person, you cannot tell by that camera angle, but that left-hander that they made went up like a big anthill. That was just, it was steep, it was slick, and it was straight up. It was hard packed, and there was a big old rut in it. it's a lot gnarlier than it looked in person, or on camera. On camera, it looked like it was just a regular flat left-hander. That was not the case at all. So Stu's reading his post. He said that he was losing traction in his front end, and basically the only thing he could do to save it was kind of straighten it out, go wide, which opened the door wide open for Caleb Russell to come up the inside and grab the lead and the eventual win, which it was a bummer. We were watching with anticipation the entire time, and it's not a bummer. Don't get me wrong like that. Obviously, Caleb Russell is Caleb Russell. He just won 63, his 63rd race, adding to his all-time bike record. But just to see the way that it unfolded and to see the way that it ended, I don't think anybody could help but to be a little bit bummed for Stu. Like, obviously pumped for Caleb, but obviously bummed for Stu for it to happen like that. History was made with that performance by Stu Baylor, which, if you guys remember, he finished just off the podium in 4th at round number 1. He finished on the podium in 2nd at the National Enduro. Florida, both he and Grant had some issues on their Sherco machines. Not really Sherco related. And then this weekend, Stu put on a very, very, very good performance. And it was the first time in GNCC history that a Sherco was on the overall podium. So even though he came up just a hair short at the finish, no doubt he's still got a lot to be proud of, and he's got to have a lot of confidence knowing that he can do that and proving that he can do that and going out there and doing what he did while also putting Sherco on the podium for the very first time. Josh Strang on that Team Babbitt's Online Monster Energy Kawasaki, he had a very solid ride. He finishes 3rd. He had to battle his way up around Lane Michael, Jordan Ashburn, Grant Baylor was in the mix too. Like, there was a lot of people battling back and forth, but it was Josh Strang capturing his 3rd podium in a row. Starts off 2020, podium. So awesome news for Josh Strang, the only former GNCC champion, not only on the front line, but throughout the entire race. So the only former champion that's not named Caleb Russell is Josh Strang, and he gets in 3rd, ends up on the podium here at round number 3. Now, one thing I do want to point out before moving off that XC1 class, it was insane. I can't help but to reiterate that the way that the race went and the way that the race ended was absolutely insane. Today, Mason Rader's video came out. He does the video highlights and does some filming for MX Sports, Racer TV, Racer X, all that stuff. It's all the same company. He films for them. He works for them. And he does the highlight videos every single week. And his highlight video just came out. Now, one thing he's been doing is miking up riders and their teams for the highlight videos, which I think is absolutely awesome. The videos are coming out super cool. It lets you see stuff that you won't ever see without that, and hear stuff that you won't ever hear without it. It gives it a really personal feeling. It makes you feel like you're there. I really like what he's doing with him this year, and I've communicated that with him a lot. So if you haven't seen it yet, I highly suggest you go check it out. It's on GNCC. It's on Racer TV's YouTube, I know for sure, but GNCC posted it. I think Mason posted it, and if you follow On the Pipe Podcast on Facebook, we posted it as well. Go check it out because it's really good. But at the end of it, when Stu comes off and he's going through all that, he says a couple things that honestly I was surprised made the video, because the first thing out of his mouth was, it's going to be effing hard to beat KTM with their lines. And I might have that quote a little bit wrong, but the gist of it was that. And if you've ever raced a GNCC, you'll notice that all over the track you will see KTM people in KTM jackets standing in the middle of the track. Those people are not there trying to get the best view in the house. Those people are not there trying to look pretty. Those people are not there taking pictures. Those people are there to help KTM factory team riders navigate through these sections and find lines and help their riders through them. Side note, if you get to a super gnarly section, whether it's a mud hole, whether it's a hill climb, whether it's whatever, if you get to a really tough spot and there's people stuck or you don't know which way to go and you see someone in a KTM jacket, spoiler alert, aim for them. Don't go to the left of them. Don't go to the right of them. Don't look at them and go where they point. Wherever they're standing, act like you're going to run them over, because 9 times out of 10, they are standing right in the dead center of the line that they want their rider to take, which 9 times out of 10 is the best line through that section. So if you see a KTM rider and you're in doubt, or a KTM team member and you're in doubt, aim for them. They will move, and you'll more than likely end up in a really good line. So I'm not sure if that is a trade secret, but I think it's pretty much common knowledge at this point. So aim for KTM jackets and you should be good to go. But that was what Stu was referring to when he comes off the track. Says it's going to be hard to beat KTM with their lines. Sherco, this is their first year on the front line in the premier class of the GNCCs. They have a really, really good team in place. They have really good mechanics. They got a lot of stuff behind them. They're still trying to figure the bike out. They are not a huge team. They don't have the resources or the people that KTM does. They can't put 10 people out in the woods pointing lines like KTM can. So that's what he was referring to there. So it'll be interesting to talk to Stu about that and ask him to elaborate a little bit more on that. And because obviously KTM does not want Sherco to win any races over a KTM, and definitely don't want them to win any championships over a KTM. So Stu has ridden KTMs his entire life. I'm sure he has a lot of relationships over there. I think business is business, and KTM people aren't going to help Sherco people out in the woods. So it was kind of interesting to see Stu allude to that. And then later on, he also says, and this is a direct quote, I wrote this one down so I didn't get it wrong, but it says, "I'm not happy we have to use my truck. I'm not happy we don't have quick fills. I'm not happy that my whole list was uncompleted. A lot has got to happen." So that was coming directly from Stu after the race, which is very telling of the times going on. So Stu is not one to pull any punches or hold back what he's thinking. So really interested to hear that candidly. Like I said, Jade was actually mic'd up. So Stu was saying it just like he was talking to Jade, but because of the way this stuff is happening, we all as fans got to see it and got to hear it very candidly, which I can respect. And so I don't know. It's going to be tough. We got an update in the middle of the live show. Someone texted Rodney during one of the commercial breaks talking about the tanks and how this coronavirus and the Chinese New Year both played a role in the reason why the tanks, the oversized tanks for the Shercos, aren't here yet. And he assured that they should be there by the next round. Well, now they just got a 2-week extension into the next round. So I sincerely hope, for Stu Baylor's sake and for the Sherco team's sake, that those tanks get here before we go racing, hopefully at Camp Coker in 5 weeks. So that is undoubtedly a huge part of racing. And I will say that they had to have practiced their pit several times because they had it down pat. They came in, cap was already off, which I'm assuming Stu took it off as he was coming in. Immediately, Eric dropped the tank, or dropped the fill can into the tank, starts filling it up. Jade was handing Stu goggles. Stu putting his goggles on. Eric gets done with the gas, pulls the gas can out, and then someone else is already putting the gas cap back on while Stu is adjusting his goggles. So really, all in all, besides Stu having to fumble with the gas cap before he gets to the pit, and then maybe that delaying the time that it took him to put the new goggles on, he really didn't lose much time on that pit because they were done with gas as he was still adjusting his goggles, and then he took off and left. But nevertheless, it couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 seconds longer at the absolute most. And so I'm saying that to credit the hell out of that Sherco team and Eric Seriton. I mean, dude, he has been killing it. If you watch the Florida live stream when they came in and had to replace a tank, and Eric went from not knowing what was wrong with the bike to knowing that the tank needed to be replaced, finding the tank, taking the tank that they were using off, put the stock tank on in less than 3 minutes is how long it took him to do that. And then this weekend, they worked, they practiced, they ran the stock tanks to not run into issues that they ran into at Florida with the receiver breaking off. So they ran the stock tanks with the screw caps, and I think they did the best job that you can possibly do with a screw cap while pitting in the XC1 Pro Class. So big kudos to Sherco, big kudos to Stu, big kudos to Eric, big kudos to Garrett, and kudos to Brant, kudos to Brad, Kraus. Kudos to everyone involved with that Sherco team. It's growing pains. You're not going to come in and be good the first time you do anything at anything in life. So, like I said, kudos to all that team, and they are getting better, and they're figuring things out, and now they got an extra 2 weeks, like I mentioned, so 5 weeks before we go racing again. Hopefully they can get everything dialed in and be ready to come out swinging at Camp Coker, which is in South Carolina. Baylor's South Carolina natives. They grew up racing the Camp Coker motocross track. They like going there, so it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. But those were the biggest stories of XC1 throughout the weekend. It made for an exciting race. Watching Stu go out there, watching them cut back and forth, him and Caleb between the lines and the trees. Caleb came from the back. I don't know what was going on with Caleb. He was down by where I was parked at, which is right by the triple on the moto track, and coming back to the pro pits when they go outside of the moto track alongside the fence and then across the road, and then that's when they go up to the pro pits. Him and Auntie and his mechanic were all right there at that road for probably 15 minutes sitting there talking. I mean, everyone keeps talking about Caleb Russell being late to the line. That's where he was at. Unfortunately, I don't have any more information to offer you other than that's where he was at. Don't know what he was doing. Don't know what they were talking about. Don't know what was going on. But that's where he was at. And then he ended up getting back to the line, and they did the rider introductions, and everything was good to go from there. But, yeah, he didn't get the best start in the world, and he was pretty far back, like 5th or 6th, and he kept plugging away, made his way up through the pack, and that is when the battle with him and Stu Baylor ensued. And Lane Michael was running towards the front for a good portion of the beginning of the race, which was awesome to see that that out of Lane. It's cool to see him up front. Obviously, changed bikes, changed programs, changed everything, and coming off of an injury. So it's cool to see him get that burst of speed, and hopefully that will help with his confidence and build him up as he looks to improve throughout the year. But, yeah, it was so cool to see the line differences between Stu and between Caleb. There was one spot where Stu went into this deep rut and came to a stop. I'm talking feet off the pegs, flying all over the place. Bike came to a stop. Caleb was right behind him. Caleb saw that happen, kind of brake checked. When he brake checked, I think he was clear of the deep rut. But then when he brake checked for Stu, I think his front end slid into the same rut that Stu was in. Well, Stu was able to get on the gas, get his bike out, and keep going. And this was the last lap, either last lap or second to last lap. But Caleb, since he dropped that front end into that deep rut, he pretty much had to go through it. Well, then he ended up getting stuck in that deep rut. And the craziest part was the lapper that he had just passed threw his bike, like in the middle of the trail. This guy threw his bike down and went over, grabbed a hold of Caleb's fork, and was sitting there pulling on it. And I think a spectator was helping as well. But whoever that rider was that threw his bike down to help Caleb Russell, you better go tell Caleb Russell he owes you a damn Red Bull or damn race century or something. If anybody knows who that was, and if you happen to listen to the show, please send me a message. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to that person, and I want to get the story from their eyes, because he did right in the middle of the damn trail. I wish I could tell you what time it was during the race, but he threw that bike down right in the middle of the trail and helped pull Caleb Russell out of that hole and send him back on his way, which was pretty cool, and I'm sure it was very much appreciated by Caleb Russell. XC2. This XC2 battle is heating up to be such a great battle and one to watch throughout the rest of the season. Any one of these guys can win on any single one of these days. They were all three favorites coming into the season. I'm talking about Craig DeLong, Jonathan Gerard, Mike Witkowski. That was the finishing order this past weekend. So it was Craig DeLong, who was on the show last week, talked to us about switching over to that factory Rockstar Husqvarna team and talked about the growing pains associated with that, but letting us know that his goal did not change and it remains the same. So he goes out there, backs it all up, what he was saying. He gets it done. He gets the win. He did not lead every lap. There was a lot of swapping and everything going back and forth in that XC2 class. We came into the race, first of all, with a tie for the points lead. That means there was 2 white plates being ran by the 282 of Mike Witkowski, and the 969 of Jonathan Gerard. So Mike on that Ampro Factory Yamaha and Johnny Gerard on that Trail Jesters factory-backed KTM. These guys change positions every single lap. I'm pretty sure, I'm just checking right now, literally every single lap there was a change in the top 3. Except for lap 3 and 4. Lap 3 and 4, they stayed the same. Every other lap there was a change in the top 3, the podium spots for XC2. So this battle is going to come down to the wire. And also, not to mention Cody Barnes. Cody Barnes put in a good ride. He was 4th place. But, yeah, it was a pretty crazy battle throughout XC2. Now, we're at round number 3, and all 3 of them have won a race. So this points battle, I think, is going to come down to the wire. We've kind of seen the XC2 class get ran away with ever since 2016. I mean, Bollinger won it very handedly, and then the next year, Josh Toth won it very handedly, and then the next 2 seasons, Ben Kelly won it very handedly, and now we're at a spot where if you told me that I had to put my life savings on one of these 3 riders to win the championship, first of all, I would tell you that I don't have a life savings anymore because the coronavirus is going to put me out of work and I'm not going to have any money and I'm going to have to blow it all on my bills. But besides that, I would have absolutely no idea who to put it on. I can guess, I can speculate, I can make the best educated guess that I can, but I don't know who's going to win that class. I don't think anybody knows who's going to win that class. Like I mentioned, they have all 3 won a race so far. And, I mean, Jonathan Johnson, he was 4th at the first round, looking great. But he broke some ribs and obviously been struggling with that. And now we've seen Cody Barnes in the 4th place spot for the last 2 races in a row. So, I mean, he can always get up there. Jesse Ainsley, he's getting better each and every race. Thorne Devlin, not a typical GNCC rider. He's going to get better throughout the season. Evan Smith was hurt, which sucks. Liam Draper, we saw him on, I don't know what's going on with him. So he just signed that deal with the factory KTM team for National Enduros. But this weekend he was wearing a factory KTM jacket, but still on his Teely Energy Racing KTM. Nevertheless, he is 5th place in points, got 6th place on the weekend. I think we will see him getting better and improving throughout the season. But the main focus, the main battle is between those top 3 riders. And with Jonathan getting hurt and kind of putting himself out of it early on, well, I guess XC2 gets 2 drops, and now Jonathan's going to have some time to get off the bike and heal. So he could very well get back in the mix as well. But I'd be willing to bet it's going to be one of these top 3 riders in Craig DeLong, Mike Witkowski, and Johnny Gerard. I think one of them 3 is going to end up the champion, and it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a runaway. It's going to be a very hard-fought and well-deserved and hard-earned victory by whoever chooses to get it. But with their finishing positions, all 3 of them have been on the podium. All 3 of them have swapped places on the podium, but it is Jonathan Gerard. So Johnny G was on the show last week. Craig DeLong was on the show last week. Mike Witkowski was on the show 2 weeks ago. And it's going to come down to a battle. Johnny G is out front. He is your current points leader. 4 points back from him is Mike Witkowski, and 4 points back from Mike is going to be Craig DeLong. So, like I said, that's a battle to keep an eye on. They swap positions every single lap except for between lap 3 and 4. So, it's going to be a cool battle. And, yeah, I wish we could have saw more of that battle take place. But with XC1 the way it was and the jockeying for position and the swapping back and forth for the lead that Stu and Caleb were doing, that's where a lot of the TV focus was. But no doubt, every time we did see the XC2 riders on screen, they were all in this same camera shot. That's how damn close they were the entire time. You see one of them in a camera shot, you see all three of them in a camera shot. And they all ended up finishing 4th, 5th, and 6th overall. So, it's going to be crazy. They're going to push each other to go faster and faster and faster. And no doubt that we'll see one, if not more than one, on the overall podium as we continue through this 2020 season, whenever that may be. Moving into our FMF XC3 class, it was the man, the myth, the legend, tonight's guest, Jason Rains. Jason Rains whole shots it, leads green to checkers, and finally checks off the win box from his list of things to do for the 2020 season. He led the majority of Big Buck before getting past, which he also talks about in the interview, so I'll let him tell you that story rather than me. But he was close at Big Buck, ended up getting second, settled for a second there to Zach Hayes. Zach Hayes won in Florida as well. Jason didn't do so hot in Florida, but he comes out, capitalizes on both of those, and gets the win here at round number 3. Cole Madison gets second place, which Cole has been doing really well in that XC3 class. It's also good to see him back racing. I think he took all of last year off. He was racing XC2 before that for that Atlas Cycles Yamaha team there with Trevor Barrett. They were both teammates on those Yamahas in XC2. And then Zach Hayes also making the move from XC2 back to the XC3 class. Well, not back to the XC3 class because this is his first year running it. As mentioned, he's still the points leader. He won the first 2 rounds and gets on the podium in the 3rd round. So Zach Hayes, a force to be reckoned with in that XC3 class. Jason Rains, also a force to be reckoned with, and so is Cole Madison. And I'll let Jason tell you a little bit more about how that XC3 battle played out, because it's actually really cool to hear, and it involves pretty much everyone in there. So we'll wait for him and let him break down XC3. And then our top amateur, who's also a guest of the podcast a couple of weeks ago, Brody Johnson on that Phoenix Racing Honda. Phoenix picked him up for that amateur support, and trust me, he has been making the most of it. That is now 3 for 3 wins for Brody Johnson in 250A, and not only in 250A, but for the amateur overall as well. He won Top Am by 8 minutes over second place this past weekend. So Brody Johnson is super gnarly and a guy to keep our eyes on at only 17 years old. So got some factory support, got a whole team behind him, and he is making the most of it and showing that it was a very solid investment for them to get behind him, and he keeps cashing checks on that Top Am podium. So that's it for the afternoon race. We're going to move into our WXC action. Becca Sheets gets her 3rd straight win, continues her perfect season so far in 2020. Mackenzie Tricker, not the best race at Big Buck. Did better at Florida, ended up on the podium in Florida in 3rd, moves up 1 spot this week to 2nd, and she is also the first guest on the podcast. We're going to get to her in just a moment for her to tell you about that, which is also a really fun and informative interview from her. And then our reigning, defending 3-time GNCC Series champion, the number 1 Rockstar Energy Land Mills XC Husqvarna of Taylor Jones, will round out your podium in 3rd place, which Taylor, she kind of the same thing. She ended up in, I should know this, it was either 2nd or 3rd at Big Buck, and then she gets 2nd last weekend in Florida, starting from behind the Sportsman A-Row, comes from all the way behind 2 different classes physically, and works her way back into 2nd place. And this weekend, she ends up in 3rd. And I was standing over there, and I don't know who it was that walked up and was talking to her, but I was sitting there talking to her and Allie Spurgeon, and someone walks up and asks Taylor, like, hey, did you crash? Did you have a mechanical? Like, what happened out there? And Taylor looked and said, I just lost. So big respect to her to be able to say that. I didn't ask her any more details about that because I always get super awkward in those situations, but Taylor, being the champion that she is, she did say, I just lost. She didn't make any excuses. She didn't blame it on anything. She simply stated, I just lost. But even on a bad day, to end up on the podium in that stacked WXC class, no easy feat. Get some very valuable points there, but that is the way your WXC class ended. Becca Sheets taking the win, Mackenzie Tricker in second, and Taylor Jones rounding out your top three. And then it was Rachel Archer in fourth, which Rachel has been on the podium this year as well. And Rachel Goodish was fifth in the class. So that is the way WXC shaked out. But we're going to get a little bit more info on both of these last two classes. First and foremost, we are going to go to our first guest of the evening. We are going to talk to this past weekend's WXC second place rider, last year's National Enduro champion, former ISDE world champion, 18 million time in a row Loretta's champion, all sorts of stuff. Mackenzie Tricker. Mackenzie, how's everything going today?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing pretty good, surviving the coronavirus on my end. I hope you are down there.
Yeah, I am. I'm doing what I can to try and not get it.
So, I mean, as we mentioned, you got second place this past weekend at Georgia. So, tough track, lines all over the place, and that race really was a battle with you guys, or with you girls, throughout the entire race. Kind of walk us through what happened, because I know, a fall right on the start, and then by the second lap, you're leading. So how did that whole race go? And, just walk us through it.
Yeah, I got the whole shot and then got taken down, right away, second turn. So I was, I think when I went into the woods, I was, 8th or something. I made a couple of quick passes, and I ended up being right behind Taylor. So I was like, okay, just try and, stick with her and pass some of the people, and maybe by the 3 mile marker, me and her had made it past everybody. Couldn't really see Becca; she was out front. Kind of seen her a couple of times, in the distance, but we weren't really making any time up on her. And then something happened to her at the end of the lap, and Taylor ended up going to the lead. I was second, and by that time, Rachel Archer also had caught us. And then us four kind of just switched it off a bunch of times for the next 2 laps. I think I was leading at the end of lap 2. I think when I came to the finish lap 1, I might have been third. But yeah, I went from the lead to fourth to third, second, fourth, all over the place. We swapped leads so many times. But then, yeah, the start of lap 3, I guess it was the start of lap 3 I was leading. I was leading, and I led for half of that lap. Becca passed me, and then I kind of just tried to stay with her, and by that time we were deep in lappers and whatnot, and I guess we broke away from Taylor and Rachel, and there was just kind of a head-to-head battle between me and Becca, and I stayed with her most of lap 3, and then I stopped for fuel at the 8 on the end of lap 3, and I lost sight of her, and I caught her back, and then I crashed, caught her back again, crashed, caught her back. And then at the 8, again, on the last lap, I was back with her, and I had no goggles at that point. So I was really copping some roost, dirt in my eyes. It was terrible. And I split a lapper with her, and I ended up going down. And then it was kind of too late. I could see her in the distance, but it was just not enough time to make it back up. So I think I was 22 seconds down from her. So honestly, second sucks still. I want to win, but considering how I started Big Buck 6th, and it was the worst ride I've ever had at a GNCC without a mechanical or a crash. I think it was a huge stride in the right direction. Just kind of sucks now. Racing's on a bit of a halt, but it was good. I actually really enjoyed battling with Becca. And yeah, so second, but hopefully when we get back to racing, I can start getting some wins.
Yeah, and hopefully that happens sooner rather than later. But as far as the track this past weekend, I feel like Georgia every single year develops in the same way with a gajillion lines all over the place. But you girls are the first people to the majority of the track besides four-wheelers, because, youth kind of runs their own short track. How much does that play in for you all? Like when you first get to a track, 'cause I mean, obviously when you're the first one there, it's kind of one line, but by the end of the race, it seems like there's 10 lines through the same section.
Right. Honestly, like sometimes the first lap is like absolutely terrible. It just depends. But lately they've been trying to groom majority of the quad ruts. But when like a few years ago they didn't groom the track at all, and I really struggled. Like coming from moto to off road, and then the quad ruts. Like the first lap was like ridiculous trying to ride the quad ruts. But now they do groom the track. Well, most of it, most of the bad sections, and I've got a little bit more experience in running the quad ruts and picking lines and whatnot. But like this weekend, I knew there was a lot of soft spots, and it was tough. Still on the first lap, you're like trying not to get stuck, just because some of the soft spots they had dozed and covered up the holes, you know. So you're not really sure what's under there. But yeah, this weekend, honestly, there was a lot of lines and a lot of places to get stuck. Like I wish I had like 10 people out there at all the mud holes, but unfortunately I only had Dylan and Auntie was at like 1 or 2, so it was just kind of relying on luck here and there on some of the lines we were taking, or I'd watch Becker or try and avoid where the lappers are stuck, you know. So lines were a big thing this weekend, but yeah, I mean, the track was definitely gnarly. It got really rough, and it was soft, and yeah, like I said, so many places to get stuck, but it was good, really. I had a blast.
Yeah, the dirt looked good, but like I said, it just lines open up all over the place, and as you mentioned, there's soft spots, and there's roots, and then there's slick, hard spots. It's a track that kind of throws a little bit of everything at you, but you mentioned a second ago, obviously, Dylan Bean helping you out in the woods, and you also mentioned Auntie being out there. Now, really, the top 3 of you, and now Rachel Archer is getting in the mix more and more as well, but you guys are you girls are in really a separate category as far as pushing the paces and pushing the speeds and the boundaries and everything. Last year, it was you and Becca both on KTMs. This year, Becca makes the switch. You're on a KTM. Has that affected you much at all this year? Like, are you getting more support from Auntie and KTM as a whole, or has it changed anything at all with your program?
Nah, my program's all still the same. I think it's somewhat good for the sport that Becca's like changed, you know, like it's like Stu changing to Sherka. I think it's good just for the industry, for people to move around. But I'm not going to say it's good Becca left KTM, but from my point of view, yeah, it's a little bit better for myself with having more support from them. But like just they obviously want me to win before they didn't. They want me or Becca to win. It doesn't matter. They just want a KTM to win. So from that side of view, that's good. But yeah.
Dang. Yeah,
that's kind of a tough question, but.
Well, I hadn't even thought about it until you said that, and then I realized that you're the only KTM battling up front. So.
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously they want KTM to win. Same as Husqvarna, they want Husqvarna to win, and there's probably Yamaha people that want Yamaha to win. It's just they're going to put everything into getting their brand to win. So, yes, from that thing, that's out of view. I think the KTM support has definitely stepped up for me, or I've noticed it, just for them wanting me to be on top and promote their brand.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's awesome that, like you said, that people are making changes and that there is the support through the WXC class because we haven't always seen that much support in the WXC class. So, it's cool that you guys are I keep saying that. You girls are pushing the pace and making it all happen out there. But I haven't gotten a chance to talk to you about Big Buck, and as you mentioned, 6th place finish, obviously not what you train all winter to do at the first round is to come out and get 6th place. You said there was no mechanical, no injury. What happened out there?
I don't know. Like, I think the end of last year we had, we finished on a high. I won the last National Enduro, the last full gas, and the last GNCC, and then I probably should have won the second last GNCC. I led majority of the race and got stuck on a hill. and then Taylor ended up beating me. But I think that was mine to lose there. So like we ended on a high, and I got a little bit overconfident. I'm actually riding the 350 this year. So I got a little bit overconfident. We changed some stuff with my bike, and honestly, I could not even hold on to the thing at Big Buck. I had the worst arm pump. Like, I think my suspension was a little bit off. We also were running a big tank, like a even bigger tank than what I had been running. So it was just like a combination of things. And actually, at the first full gas, I hurt my knee, so I wasn't able to race the bike other than 2 tests. With the settings that we had been doing. Look, when you practice, it's different. It's a little bit. It's not racing. You just can't get the same practice like as racing.
Yeah.
So we learned absolutely the hard way. I was like struggling to keep everybody behind me on the first lap, and then they passed me. I couldn't even keep up with them, and like it was terrible. Like I really wanted to pull off that day and quit, but it was. Yeah, I was glad I didn't, but it was like rock bottom for me. I was like, man, what the hell is going on? We were scratching our heads for obviously till Florida. With like Tuesday after Big Buck, we went down to Sumter. I was like so sore, tired, but we like went straight back to the drawing board, changed everything back, and like my first moto, I was like, this is like a different bike compared to what I had raced on the Sunday at Big Buck. So. It's worked these past couple of races. I did an FTR, and then obviously Florida GNCC last weekend, and then Georgia GNCC, and we've gone forward, so that's all that matters. So now we've got another race, but hopefully we can make some more improvements, and maybe when we start racing again, get some wins.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned going through and making those changes after Big Buck. So the setup that you've been running for Florida and Georgia, is that back to your previous changes, or did you get the setup before Big Buck dialed back in?
No, yeah. So I just went back straight after Big Buck. We went completely back to what we finished with last year. And yeah, I haven't changed anything from that. So we just like went back, changed everything. So like that completely, everything that I thought was better for me. In the off season didn't end up being better, so we just changed it all back to what we finished at the end of last year, and so far, it's working for me. So gotcha. I don't know if there's any point in changing that right now.
Yeah,
but yeah,
looks not.
Like this weekend, I didn't get one little bit of arm pump. Like I had no problem at all. So, but I couldn't even hold on after like the first 5 minutes at Big Buck. Then also like it's the first race, maybe a little bit more nervous. I don't know. It was a little bit cold. I don't know. There's like a lot of things, but I'm glad that's over. And I thought we were going to be going back to Big Buck, and I was like, oh no, that was not good. But it could have been some redemption. But I guess we're not now. So yeah,
nope.
Hopefully it's all up from here.
According to them, that rumor has been squashed. But yeah, like you said, back to the basics. Or back to what you're comfortable with. Finishing out last year strong. And then ever since changing back to that original setup, you've gone 3 and then 2. So there's only one more spot to move up the podium there. And hopefully we can see you get there when racing resumes, whenever that may be. But, everyone knows that you came from a very successful motocross background. As mentioned, WMX race wins. You got three in a row championships at Loretta's. Several Australian national championships in moto. The year before last, you got the ISDE gold for Team Australia at the ISDE for the women. And then in 2019, you end the season as the National Enduro Women's Elite Champion. So a lot of success through your racing career in moto, and now even more success as you switch over into off-road. Just curious, do any one of those championships stand out to you as being like more memorable or a favorite one of yours?
Probably my Loretta title in 2015. I was like really struggling that year. I was not really winning many WMX races. Like kind of, I don't know, wasn't really having fun. Like it was a terrible year. Like I remember like the week or two before Loretta's, I'm like to my mom, I don't think I want to race Loretta's. Like I was really not confident. I'm like, I don't even know if I'll get top 5. Like, it was fast that year. Every good girl in women's motocross in America was there that year. And yeah, I ended up pulling through and winning. So that was like and my mom ended up coming over. She's like, "I'll come and help you. Like, just be there for support." And so that was a pretty memorable one. And then obviously the National Enduro Championship last year. That's my first championship in off-road, and obviously it was far from where I came from. Because a lot of people surprised, enduro is a lot tighter than obviously moto. It's a lot tighter than GNCC, but it's like way tighter than moto, and like not many people that have come from moto do good in it. I kind of surprised myself and a lot of people, but honestly, that's like my favorite series, and I do the best, and I have so much fun doing that. I'm kind of glad that I tried it in 2017.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next. So obviously, 1 GNCC races, 1 full gas sprint enduros, and you always do really well at those too. But National Enduro Championship, I was going to ask which one of the 3 you prefer racing the most, but you said you actually prefer the National Enduros the most.
Yeah, the National Enduro. I really don't know why. I think also like not the quad ruts. That's probably like 50% of the reason. The trails are good. Like, I don't know. I really have a blast there. The full gas I like as well. Just it's more from where I came from. Sometimes I feel like it get pretty sketchy there. It's a short sprint, and it gets really, really rough just because it's a pretty one line, and like tight taped trail. But I like that too. And I like GNCC too, but I seem to have the most problem with GNCC, and I get really frustrated. But that's what this year I've been really just trying to, especially after starting off Big Buck terrible. These last 2 races I've really just been trying to just have a positive outlook, like if you do get 6th again, like whatever, like try not to. Like, a Big Buck, when I was riding 6, I was, like, so angry that I think it was just hurting me even more. And I was so going more further backwards. Like, kind of just have a level head, change my attitude towards it as best I can. And, like, this weekend I did that, and I obviously did the best I've done all year. Or it was one of my best races in a few years. So, it's so easy to get frustrated at GNCC with, like, the lappers and sometimes the track conditions, and also it's a long race, or you don't have time to stop and regroup for the next test or something, like it's 2 hours, and if you, like this weekend I cashed up the start and I was able to regroup pretty quick. Like, I could have really let that affect my whole race, but I was just kind of like, obviously I was pretty angry if you see my video, but it is what it is. Like, I couldn't change it, so it was like just 2 hours just trying to make the best of it. And so that's kind of, I like it all. It's just been for me, honestly, it's just been like a major learning curve. Like, I came to off-road in 2016, and I did like 3 GNCCs. I did North Carolina, and I went the wrong way. Like, the mini bike trail, like the tape was down, so a bunch of us went like on the mini trail and cut a bunch of tracks. So I ended up like getting a lap taken away from me. So I don't know, I got like an 8. And then I went on to win the next 2, and I was like, this is like a great, like easy. And like WMX was falling apart at the time, so I was like, got some support with KTM for like the following year. I'm like, I can easily win. Then Taylor came over, and she like stepped everybody's game up. And then I haven't barely won many races. Like, it's been really tough. So like every time I've raced GNCC or any off-road, I'm like continuously learning. There's just like so much unknown as well, like it's a lot of like team tactics and a lot of experience. Like, you watch Caleb, like there's so much like experience, and I don't know, like, you see how good all those other riders are, and Caleb's just still better than them. I think it's like it's everything, racecraft, So it's been a real experience, and hopefully over the next few years I gain more experience and I can just get better.
Yeah, and it is weird at GNCC. You mentioned how that start could have flustered you. I mean, that's absolutely right. And once that green flag waves, you're in it for 2 hours, whether you want to be there or not, whether you like your bike setup or not. Where as National Enduros, you got 6 tests. So if you are struggling with a setup like you were at Big Buck, you have an opportunity to maybe change some things. And then same thing at a Sprint Enduro. You got 6 tests throughout the day, and then you can even completely change everything between the 2 days. And GNCC, once you start, you're in it. So,
Yep.
like you mentioned, though, you had some success. You came over, you won 2 out of the first 3 that you raced, and then moved into the series. And since then, I mean, I think that WXC class has been completely changed in the past 3 years, with all of you pushing each other. So
Yeah, absolutely.
it's funny you say that switching over to GNCC, you were like, oh, this is going to be easy. And then all this happens, and you guys, girls, are pushing the sport so much each race and each year. So how important is it for you to prove to yourself that you can go out and win one of these GNCC championships? Like, what would winning that championship above the other ones mean to you?
Oh, it would definitely mean a lot, just obviously because it's been like my worst championship. Like I've won a National Enduro. Second multiple years in full gas. I haven't won one of those yet either. But yeah, I've been third. I've got like probably the record number of third places in the series, and like so it'd be good to win one. And obviously, like GNCC for the off-road championships in the US, GNCC is like the top one. Like I'm not going to say people don't care about a National Enduro full gas, but GNCC, like it's just a little bit more recognized. Like I've still got a lot of recognition from winning the National Enduro, but it'd be cool to obviously back on my National Enduro championship and win a GNCC championship. So we'll see. I think this year, like Becca's kind of came in really strong. You know, I think shocked a lot of people winning the first 3, and I think it's great for. Obviously, I don't want her to beat me, and none of the other girls want her to beat them, I'm sure, you know, and she doesn't want us to beat her. It's just how it is. But I think it's good for the sport. You know, Taylor's kind of been dominant for the last 3 years, so it's good. It's just like you see Caleb winning everything, and like it's good that he's winning. Like I'm got nothing against him, but you know, when somebody else wins, it's good for the sport. You know, so I think it's good for women's racing to have somebody else winning, and it's like. People want to watch it. Like the same person's winning every week. You know, people like, oh, like what a surprise. You know, so it's good. And it gets more, like more people looking at it. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Taylor came over. She won all 3 series 2 years in a row, and then last year you were the first person to beat her in any national series by grabbing that National Enduro Series championship. So, like I said, it's kind of pushed the whole WXC across the board to another level with the 3 of you, and as we mentioned, there's some other, Rachel Goodish, Rachel Archer. I mean, there's other people getting in the mix as well. Brooke Cosner was in the mix before her injury and stuff too. But
yeah.
I mean, obviously, you and Taylor both over here from Australia. You've been over here for quite some time racing moto before you made that transition into woods. Have you sat down and thought about how many more years you want to stay over here? I mean, are you here for good? Do you want to go back? Where do you stand with all of that stuff?
I don't know. People ask me that all the time. That's a real tough question. Obviously, like now, my boyfriend Dylan, his family's here. My family's in Australia. I don't know. I really don't know. But as far as, I don't know about where I'm going to live, but as far as like racing, I probably don't have many more years left. Obviously, it's like been a great experience. And like right now, I make pretty decent money. But at the end of the day, like if I get hurt, or like right now we're about to go 5 weeks without racing, I don't make very much money up front. So like I'm funding myself and Dylan to both live. So like racing is obviously like I make bonuses for top 3. So that's like my biggest income. So, you know, it's kind of hard if something happens or like this. Like obviously I would never have thought at the start of this year that we wouldn't be racing because of like coronavirus.
Yeah.
So like it's kind of, it's not very consistent. And then obviously like I'm almost 25. I want to have kids like in the next 5 years. Like my body's getting tired. Like you see my knees already jacked up. I need to get that fixed. Caleb's 30 something, and you got 30, and then you got Dad and all that. Like those boys, they're 30. They've already got kids, and it's fine for them. Their wives are able to have kids and them still race. It's different being a female, and So that's like a little bit different. It's a little bit tougher situation, and obviously we don't make near as much money as those guys. So I don't really know. Probably a year or two more. I'm kind of just like playing it by year. If you had asked me this like 2 years ago, I probably would have said like 2 years. So I'll be done. Like I was like, I'm gonna be done when I'm 25. So I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, yeah, I didn't. It's funny you mentioned the whole thing about them being able to start and have families while in the middle of a race season, where you definitely can't do that. So yeah, I mean that's exactly right. But in your time left racing, do you have any plans, any aspirations, any unfinished business of wanting to go back and do anything? I mean, you got Supercross Futures now. You got obviously Loretta's still going strong. Does any part of you want to go back and make another run at that before you hang up the boots or the helmet or whatever you want to say?
You know what? Honestly, I've like been like anti-Loretta's like for the past couple of years, and just like on the way to Georgia on the weekend, I was like, something came into my mind about Loretta's I like to do, and I'm like, I wonder if I could like do Loretta's. And this year, just like we don't have a race, we have a full gas on like the weekend that it ends. Mm-hmm. So like I know the people at MX Sports, we could probably make it so we like our motos got done Friday, but I looked at the areas and regionals and I don't think I can make it work. But I don't know, now with coronavirus stuff getting canceled, maybe. So I was like, I could maybe do Loretta's. I don't know if I would be like capable of winning right now. I haven't been riding any moto for like the past couple of years. And it would be cool to go Loretta's like with a little bit less stress. Obviously I want to do good, but my few times that I went to Loretta's, I'm telling you, I couldn't wait till the end of the week. Like I was like, on Monday, I was like, I cannot wait to drive out of this place. Like the stress was just like unbelievable. So like I would like to go and like just do it for more like fun. Obviously, then I was like there to win. Like if I didn't win, I wasn't gonna be stoked. So I'd like to go to Loretta's and just like live it up. Like if I get 10th, if I get 8th, if I win, I don't care. Like, so I don't know. Before my end of my racing, I'd like to maybe do that. But honestly, racing the 3 series that I do, I don't really have any off weekends. So I don't know. But other than that, I'm probably never going to the 6th day again. Well, I had a really bad experience there this past year.
You said you're probably never going again?
Yeah, definitely not. It just was like horrible for me this past year. I'd rather probably not talk about it. But unless it's in the States or Australia, I would like to go. But I don't think Australia would take me back anyway. It's not very good. Just because I obviously went and didn't finish. But other than that, obviously I'd like to be awesome, just win every race I go in. Obviously that's what everybody wants. It just doesn't work like that. But yeah, obviously this year my goal is to obviously win the National Enduro Championship again, and then try and finish better than second and better than third in the GNCC. If I can be better than I was last year, that's obviously better. So I guess we'll see.
Yep, and as you mentioned, doing well in those 3 series is what pays the bills, and that's your focus now, so completely understand that.
Yeah.
But on the bright side, if you do go to Loretta's, at least you won't have to worry about 20-minute motos. You'll just be getting warmed up by the time that's over.
Yeah, exactly. Like now I'm like, 20 minutes is not even that long. I'm like, back in the day, I was like, oh my God, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And like some kids that I know around here that want to go Loretta's or they still race moto, they're like, when they like win when it's like a 7-minute moto, and I'm like, you guys got no idea. Like, if only you knew, like 2 hours, or like at Sumter, the first like 4 tests were like almost 40 minutes. Like we did like long motos. Like I was like, this is like, when's it gonna end? Like and like there was like back in the day, like you do an area qualifier, so it was like 4 laps, and you're like, this, like, it felt long, you know, but it's just like, that's all you knew. Now it's like, I think if I went and did Loretta's or something like that, a 20-minute moto would still, like, I wouldn't say it would be easy, but it would just go by quick compared to a 2-hour GNCC.
I mean, hell,
So,
I don't even think that there's any national enduro tests that are less than 20 minutes.
yeah, no, there's not many. There was a couple last year that were like 15 minutes, but it's very rare. I like them when they're like around 20 minutes. 40 minutes, you start to like, man, this is starting to get long. Like,
yeah, especially
I actually write down on like when you get this trail sheet or at the start of the day, I write down like the start mileage of the test and what it's ending, because like sometimes out there they'll have like mile 30 or mile 40 or whatever, and I'll be like, I'll see like mile 35, and I'm like, okay, we finished this test at 40, and I feel like, you know, got like 5 more miles, and I feel like we've already been going forever.
Yeah.
Like, obviously go to the end, like pin it to the end, but I like to know like what I kind of do it mainly for the transfers. Like, if we finish at mile 40 and we start the next test at mile 42, obviously we have a 2-mile transfer in between. But I'll look before and I'll kind of see when the end of the test is near, you know. And sometimes I'm like, man, we still got a long ways to go. But yeah, no, maybe go to Loretta's again one day. We'll see.
All right, we'll keep an eye out for it. But yeah, I just raced my first national enduro at Sumter, and I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know how long any of the tests were. I didn't know when any of them ended. I didn't know where I was going. I was just riding.
Yeah, no,
that one was tight.
Yeah, it was tight. It was a little tighter than I remember in the past, but yeah, it was fun.
Well, nevertheless, Mackenzie, wish you all the luck in the rest of your 2020 whenever 2020 can resume. 2020 has just been a mess so far. Now, this whole virus thing, obviously not doing anyone any favors. But, yeah, thank you so much for taking the time out. And like I mentioned, good luck at your races throughout the rest of the year and going after that second National Enduro title in a row.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, and thanks for having me on here.
All right, super cool to hear from Mackenzie Tricker, and once again, thanks to her for taking the time out to speak with us. Known Mackenzie for several years now. Super nice, super competitive, wants to win, wants to get these championships, is competitive down to the core, as are all of these racers at the top of the level that they are racing at. So Mackenzie came from a successful motocross background and is transferring that into a successful off-road background. And like I said, super nice, super personable. She is good friends with the Ruperts, so Nick Rupert and then Nicole Rupert. Nicole is a young rider. I don't know quite how old she is. She's young. She was on a 65 to start the year off last year and ended up moving up to an 85. So she's riding an 85 now at the GNCC series. But Mackenzie's kind of taken her under her wing, works with her a lot. I mean, they stayed together at the race this past weekend. They stay with each other at races, at pretty much all the races, really, Full Gas and GNCC. They train together, or she helps train her in Ohio. All sorts of stuff. So it's really cool to see. I mean, someone like Mackenzie is an idol to these young girls, and for Mackenzie to take the time out and invest it into Nicole and really help her out, I mean, it just says a lot about her character as well. And really, like all those WXC riders, I mean, Taylor works hand in hand a lot with Jocelyn Barnes, which Jocelyn Barnes is a young up-and-comer. She won the Women's Amateur National Championship last year. She's super fast. She's racing WXC this year. She works with Taylor a lot. So it's really cool to see the girls at that level sharing their skills and sharing their knowledge and sharing what they've learned with the younger generation up and coming. But I know Mackenzie works a lot with the Ruperts and with Nicole. So it's super cool to see and very approachable. If you ever want to walk up and talk to her, ask her a question, I'm sure she will be more than happy to sit and talk with you. But very good interview with her. I thought it was very informative. It was cool to learn some more of that. And yeah, it was just a good interview. So appreciate that. appreciate her and all of our guests on our show. I mean, it's really cool. This next interview, I'm not going to lie, I seemed so awkward. Like, my questions, I just feel like they were so awkward. But Jason Rains, as I mentioned earlier, he's a legend. I mean, he's been around for forever. He's a wealth of knowledge. He is an encyclopedia when it comes to GNCC racing. He has won XC1 races. He has led XC1 points. He's been through it all. He was there before the big changes. He was there during the big changes with U-Haul and them coming over, and then he was there after the changes and quit racing in 2009, I think is what he says, and take some time off. Now his daughter Preston getting back involved with GNCC. He originally started riding again to push her and challenge her and get her up to speed. That turned into him going out and racing in the FMF XC3 class, where he has seen success. He's won races, and he just added another one to the win column this past weekend. So please excuse my awkwardness, because this is one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. And hopefully we'll be able to sit down and do a full in-depth interview with Jason in person and really hear a lot of those stories that he has to share, because he's seen it all. And it was a real pleasure sitting there talking with him, and I'm excited for you guys to hear this interview. It is a long one. This is a long episode of OTP Tuesday, but I think it's worth it. I think we had a couple great interviews, and we had a great race this past weekend, and I hope you enjoyed the recap of that. With that being said, we are going to move into this interview right now with Jason Rains, and then we'll be ending the show from there. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this week's show. Please subscribe on whatever you're listening to. Check out our YouTube channel. If you just search On the Pipe Podcast, it'll pop right up. Give us a subscribe there. Once we hit 100, we can do some live shows. And like I said, I'm going to start uploading these individual interviews to YouTube as well, just to give you another place to listen to them. And yeah, we're going to keep the shows coming every single Tuesday. We're going to have to fill some content here. So like I mentioned, I got some interviews lined up. Still got a podcast sitting down with Freddie Noren from the JGR team. That'll be coming up. And then, like I said, I've also reached out to several riders about doing stuff in the future. So keep an eye out. OTP Tuesday is not taking any time off. The coronavirus cannot hold us down. We will be here for your listening ears every Tuesday. And that being said, it'll get uploaded on Tuesday. May roll into Wednesday morning before you get to hear it, unless you're up late on a Tuesday. But nevertheless, the shows are coming out, and I see you guys watching them, and I very much appreciate you all watching them. And keep them coming, and I'll keep them coming to you. And thanks a lot. We're going to move into our last guest of the evening. This past weekend's XC3 Pro-Am bike winner, no stranger to the GNCC series, former XC1 competitor, Jason Rains. Jason, how's everything going tonight?
Good, guys. Appreciate you having me on. It's been a long time coming, and proud to be a part of the program.
Yeah, and so I actually met you in person in a roundabout way because of the podcast, and it was right after the ISDE updates and all that. So, been talking about it for a while. So, do what?
Yeah, it worked out good. I mean, I always listened to the ISDE updates when you were putting them up. Kind of keeping informed on what was going on over at that race, and you do a great job with that.
Appreciate it. I'm hoping one of these years we can make it through all 6 days.
That's right.
I've been making it to day 3 or 4, but trying my best.
It's a lot. It's a lot of days, a lot of info, and a lot of days, and a lot of late nights.
Especially when to not be over there and not see what's going on, and then the time change is always crazy, and so then everyone's always tired and doesn't want to talk about it. So
after about day 3, the riders are pretty tired, and they just want to get some sleep and try to get past that next day. So the last thing they want to do is spend 20 minutes talking on the phone about updates and this and that. They want to get their goggles ready and get off to bed.
Yeah, and that's the issue that I ran into. And I've never been a part of one. I've never been over to one, so I don't know how it all works while it's there. So basically, the only thing I can do is is read down the results and say them as I see them, but anybody at home can also do that. So try to make it interesting any way I can.
Yep, that's all you can do.
But, I mean, like we mentioned, former XC1 competitor, you've been around GNCC for a while. Start us off there. What year did you start racing in GNCC? And you're a Washington native, and you come all the way across the country, I believe, with a van and a dirt bike, looking to make it happen. So how did this whole thing get started?
Yeah, so basically, my career in a nutshell would be at the end of 98, I went to the ISDE over in Australia and was on the junior team, and that was kind of my first breakout performance. So then in, 99, we decided that, since my name was kind of, out there, that I always wanted to try the GNCCs as a kid. Well, watched them growing up and read the magazines, and that was before all the social media stuff. And it was always a series that I wanted to do because I wasn't a desert racer, and being out in Washington, you don't really have a lot of big races that are woods races. They're you go south for the desert stuff, and I always wanted to move east. So me and my dad decided that was the year for me to give it a try. Would be 99. So I moved back in 99 with a friend of a friend that let me stay on his couch in Pennsylvania. I had a van, a dirt bike, a gear bag, and a dresser, and that's how it all started. And 99 was a pretty good year. Ended up finishing 11th in the series overall. I rode 258 to start with, and then moved up to I got bumped to XC1 because I'd gotten a gold medal at 6 days, which it's ironic because my first XC1 race was Big Buck in 99, and that was my first. I'd won the 258 class the week prior in Georgia, and I moved up they bumped me up the next round, and it was a tough transition. Obviously riding with my heroes and those guys, it was tough for me to mentally kind of get prepared. But at the end of the year, I ended up getting a local Yamaha ride in 2000. 2001, I ended up finishing on the. Let me think about this for a second. So 2000, I finished top 5 quite a few times, so that got me a ride with the Sports Cycles team, which was a Yamaha-supported team in 01. And then that year I finished on the podium 3 times, and that got me a ride with Randy Lampro in 02, and that's kind of when, everything kind of, got rolling for me, and, started winning races and being championship contention. And, so it happened pretty fast. I mean, it was, I always tell people, when I left Washington, I wanted to, give it a try for a year, and then I'd go back home, work for the family business, and stay back in Washington. It was just kind of a checklist, right? Come back, do the GNCCs, check it off the list. And it turned into, I've been back here for 21 years now. So it's amazing what one leap of faith can do to your life, changes your whole life.
Yeah, exactly. And now you've kind of turned it into a family affair too. Preston's been killing it in the women's amateur ranks as well, and got you back in the mix racing XC3, and wife Emily training people and helping everyone else win their races and come up through the series too. So it's really cool to see how much is going on down there, and really through the help of you guys and Range Riding University, and it all plays a role in it. But coming from Washington, we also see Ricky Russell doing the same thing now, which Ricky's been on Yamahas the majority of the time that he's been over here, so I'm sure that you've worked with him a lot. Have you guys talked about a lot of the similarities or differences in coming from the West Coast to like tight East Coast woods racing? Like, how hard is it to make that transition?
Well, Ricky's he's from, similar area that I am in Washington, and, in, I think it was 09 or 2010, I had just kind of semi-retired and stopped doing it professionally, and everybody in Washington told me, Ricky's the man. He nobody can touch him in Washington. He he tried to go down and do some works races and stuff, and he did okay doing that. But he was growing up in Washington, especially Western Washington. You ride in woods. I mean, you don't ride a lot of desert stuff. So I went back home that year. I can't remember if it was 09 or 10, but he was riding a YZ252 stroke, and I was a year out. I think I was a year out from my professional career. So I went back and I wanted to do a race, right? I wanted to do a race with him, and we did a race together, and it was so funny because Ricky got out front, and I chased him down, and he made a big mistake, flew off the trail, and I stopped. We had a big lead at the time on the rest of the group, so I stopped on the side of the trail. I said, "Hey, Ricky," I said, "You okay?" And he looked up at me like, "Why are you? You can just tell, like, what are you doing? Like, we're racing." So I got the lead, and I end up winning that race. And after the race, I said, "Ricky," I said, "if you really want to make a career out of this," I said, "you're going to have to take that leap. I mean, to make a full-time career, doing the wood stuff, you need to move east. I mean, there's very few guys that have done it, being on the West Coast. Rodney Smith did it, being based on the West. Steve Hatch did it. Kudrowski did it back in the day. But you need to be in the environment. You got to ride the tracks. You got to be in the weather and the humidity. But it does take a lot of commitment. You got to leave your friends, family, and everything. But if you really want it, you need to move back. And I said I'll do whatever I can to help you. So a year went by. Never heard from him. The next year I went home. I was doing a demo, and Ricky came up, and we got to talking. And I'm like, "Hey, man, you ready yet?" He said, I've been thinking about it, I think I'm ready. I said, all right, well, let me know. So he called me, and he said he was going to come back, and he moved back here to Travelers Rest. And, I was so busy doing the riding schools and the demos and stuff, I didn't have a lot of time to dedicate to him. So it was perfect timing. Wibbly's looking for somebody to train with and ride with. So I basically brought Ricky into Travelers Rest and introduced him to Paul and let him go. So that's kind of how Ricky's career started, and he's made the best of it. I mean, he's a top contender now, and he's worked hard, and he's had to make the sacrifices that it takes to when you have to move away from everything.
Thanks. Yeah, I knew you guys obviously had worked together, but I didn't realize all that backstory and how you were able to get over here.
We didn't really know each other, when we were, because I was so much. He didn't really start racing off road till I was already gone. It was funny because he actually sent me a picture of a plaque that he got at the awards banquet in 2009, I think, or I can't remember what year, maybe 8 or 7 when he first started racing off road, and I was at the banquet, I was a speaker, and I signed his plaque for him.
Oh, wow.
It was like 200A or 200B champion, and so that was probably the first time we ever met. But I was already kind of moved away and gone from Washington when he started racing. But it takes a lot. I mean, the other guy that's came back, 2 years ago was Eric Geese, and he's making a run for it. And for me, I'm being from Washington, I know how hard it is to move across the country and leave your friends, family, and all that stuff. But at the same time, there's a small window. Once you get to a certain age, you have responsibility. You have house payments, married kids, things like that. I mean, you can't just up and go. But when you're a little bit younger, you don't have a lot of responsibility. So that's the time to, if you're going to give it a shot, I've always lived my life, kind of being, it's better to try and fail than not try at all. You don't want to be 25 years from now thinking, man, I wonder what would have happened if I would have, done this or done that. It's better to try and fail than not try at all.
Absolutely. I think it comes into one of those things where you'll regret the things you didn't do a lot more than the things that you did do and failed at.
That's exactly right. Yep.
But Eric's a good buddy of mine, and obviously we work together a lot at Full Gases, him and I helping set him up and then run him throughout the weekend and everything. And it's a bummer that he took quite the tumble at Steel Creek last year and got a concussion, kind of messed with his head a little bit. But I was actually talking to him the other day, and I think he's just now starting to get back on a bike and get competitive and go back after it again. So it's crazy how something like that can take you out for so long. 'Cause, I mean, that was over a year ago, or right at a year ago.
Yeah, he got the concussion at Steel Creek, and then he got recovered from that. Did a local race in Washington and stabbed his knee, tore his knee up, and then that's been the other part of his recovery is getting the knee repaired. And Eric actually, the first time I met Eric, he was probably, I don't know, maybe 14, 15. He came to a riding school in Washington. That's how I first met Eric, and he's a good-hearted guy and hard worker, and he wanted to. There's been a lot of people that I've talked to in Washington that have wanted to give it a try, want to do the GNCCs, but there's only been a small few that have taken the initiative to do it. It's a big commitment.
Yeah, and I mean they got a good role model in you, because obviously between you and Ricky being the big ones here in recent memory, coming over and making it happen. So it's cool that you recognize that and see that and help people out as well. But I mean, as far as when you came over, you mentioned 02 is when you got the ride with Ampro. Was 02, was that the year that you broke your leg? Was that?
Yeah.
Right? And you were leading points at that time, weren't you?
Yeah, we were going into I broke my leg at the race before the breaks. It'd be like snowshoe nowadays, but I had a full race lead going into that race, and that the broken leg, that's what that cost me the championship in the long run. Honestly, that was a big part of my career. A lot of people remember that, and it was hard to get over for a lot of years mentally to kind of flush that and try to keep pushing for race wins. You get discouraged, but it's a part of everybody's career. Injuries, and some guys can race for 20 years and not get hurt a bit, and then other guys they have injuries. It's just it's weird how one rider can I was in good shape and felt like I was strong and everything. It's just I guess I had weak bones. I don't know what to say. It's weird. Like I think when Rodney Smith got hurt there towards the end of his career, he said he went like 20 some years without a broken bone, and that's just at the level, at that top level, it's hard to believe that you can. Every day you practice, every day you ride, every day you race. Like there's so many adversities out there that it's amazing that people can stay healthy, for that long. And I think it's a part of I think it's a little bit lucky at one side, and maybe I was overtraining, I think, a little bit, and not taking the recovery. So maybe that was part of it. But yeah, that was a good year. That was my breakthrough year, and that's what kind of got me my first couple of GNCC wins, and then broke the leg and tried to come back too early, which I think every racer tries to, doctor doesn't know anything. I'll just I'll start riding before he says, and that caused more problems in the long run with the pin and the screws and all that stuff, and which drags on to the next year. And so that's when it kind of started. My career's kind of started the injury path. I had a lot of injuries, and was never won a GNCC championship. Was close a number of times, but injuries always held me back. I think it was 3 years that I was in legitimate championship contention and leading the points, and end up with injuries that set me back. But it was fun. I had a good run, and it was always everything. Everything for me was always a surprise. Even today, being able to work with Yamaha still, and after this many, I've been with Yamaha close to 20 years now, and for me it was it's been always a surprise. I'm always surprised that that all this came from from leaving home.
Yeah. It's crazy how all that has come from exactly like you were talking about earlier, taking the leap and going after what you really wanted. But how did that whole thing happen? So obviously you do all the Yamaha demos, traveling all over the country doing that. How did that come about, transitioning from racing into doing the Yamaha demos?
So in 09 was my first or my last full season racing. And after that, I was doing the riding schools, and I asked Yamaha, I said, why don't you guys do demos? You know, KTM at that point was the only other OEM doing any kind of dirt bike demos. And they said, Yamaha said, no, we don't want to do it, too much liability. So then I sent them a proposal, said, well, if I own the truck, I own the trailer, you know, you guys supply the bikes, I provide the insurance, you know, I'm 100% subcontractor, you know, would you guys do it then? And that kind of, you know, raised their eyebrow, like, oh, well, if you do that, then we don't have the liability. The big manufacturers are super concerned with, I mean, every big company nowadays is concerned about liability. So if a subcontractor takes that liability on themselves, then, you know, it's a win-win for the brand. So that's when it all started. Was 2010 was our first year doing the demos, and it was small. Like I had 4 or 5 bikes, and I'd let people ride them in between the lunch break during the riding schools, and then over time it's just grown to where, you know, now it's every weekend, all the time. We got, you know, multiple trucks, you know, all scattered around the country, and, you know, it's a full-time job for sure. You know, now we're up to 12 bikes per truck, and, you know, keeping everything organized is, you know, it's a full-time job. And, you know, I tell people all the time, you know, now I'm a full-time mechanic. That's all I just work on bikes, like nonstop. Like never. If I have an open minute, like there's always something to do on one of these bikes.
You maintaining your bike, maintaining Preston's bike, maintaining the 12 bikes in the truck, and.
Yeah, and Preston's done an amazing job the last couple of years. You know, she's turned into a good mechanic. You know, she's taken a love to working on bikes and helping in the shop. And, you know, she does 90% of her bike stuff herself. I mean, as far as like, you know, the basic maintenance, and you know, that was where, you know, where the whole thing started with her when she started racing. It was kind of like, okay, I want to, you know, try to, you know, I know we're kind of transitioning into a different portion here, but, you know, that's when I started racing again, was when she wanted to start racing again, you know, like she wanted to start racing. And, you know, I was like, well, you know, you need somebody to train with, you need somebody to ride with, you know, for safety. And as she started taking it more and more serious, then, you know, I took it more and more serious. And even like this year, I didn't plan on racing at all. Like, I mean, honestly, I didn't, you know, plan on racing. And then, you know, we worked hard all winter, and, you know, training and riding and stuff. And then I'm like, well, since we've already done the work, you know, might as well, you know, do the racing. So that's kind of why for me, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for her. And the whole 125 thing was because of her too. I'm like, well, if she's going to ride 125s, well, then I should ride 125, so then she can have bikes after, you know, like she can have my hand-me-downs. You know, and then so I can get them set up for her, and it's worked out good. I mean, I enjoy racing, but at the same time, like as I get older, I don't enjoy I enjoy the process more now. You know, the training and the riding and practicing, that's fun. I love that. You know, the racing and the pressure and the expectations, and, you know, the mental stress, you know, that gets harder for me to deal with, you know, just, you know, over time. It's just hard to deal with that every weekend.
Oh, I definitely understand that. But as far as the 125 thing goes, so that decision, as far as when you did come back and start racing again, was the decision to go XC3 more based off the 125 thing, with Preston transitioning into a big bike within a few years after that? Or was it more wanting to try that new class that was kind of built towards former competitors and former champions and things like that?
Well, in 18, when I did it, it was kind of a little bit of a little bit of both. I mean, I knew she was still riding super minis at the time, and she said she wanted me to race a complete series with her. So I was like, I started looking at classes, and I really 100% did not want to ride 3 hours ever again in my life. Like when I stopped racing in 2009, like I'm like, I don't ever want to race 3 hours in my entire life ever again. And then I started looking at classes, and there's nothing that I can ride in the morning race that would accumulate points. Sportsman doesn't accumulate any points for anything.
Yep.
So then I started looking at the afternoon race. And, XC1's out of the question, XC2's out of the question. If I rode 30, 40 plus, people would whine, the people would make fun of me, and they would call me sandbagger. So then it was like, I thought, well, XC3 class, there's no age restriction. There's no past champion restriction. There's really no restrictions other than 125. And then you get, from my side, the motivation was your third row, so you're a good starting position. You get on the podium if you finish on the podium, and you get a decent overall because you're further up in the rows. So that was kind of my ending, reason for doing it was, I wanted to ride a 125 because Preston needs a 125 in another year. Got a good starting position. You paid a championship, points. And so that's where I settled at. And
now, I mean, obviously on a YZ 125 for the first season in 18, now we see the 125X, so the YZ 125X. I just, as a person that's raced the 125 myself in the 125 BC class, because when I first started working for Racer TV and GNCC, I was in the same deal. I obviously had to work the pro race because that was the main focus, but I was able to work it out with them that they'd still let me race the morning race. And so same thing, I'm going through all those different classes, and it's like, man, I really don't want to go trash my bike and go through all this stuff for racing to race a sportsman class that doesn't pay anything out throughout the year. So there was a 125 BC class, and I had been riding a 450 for 2 years prior, and I said, well, I'm going to buy a 125 and race 125 BC because that's the only B class in the morning. So that's how I ended up getting a brand new YZ 125 and racing it and adapting from a 450 to a 125, and it was super weird at first, but you going back and competing at the highest level on a 125, like I said, now there is the off-road version, the X. Can you tell a big difference between the YZ 125 and the 125X, and which one are you riding now?
So we're both riding, Preston and I are both riding the 125X. I mean, and really like off the showroom floor, like if you're an off-road rider, exclusively the 125X off the showroom floor is ready to race. Like it's got the suspension's going to be, supple over the rocks and smooth over the roots. The power is going to be a little bit broader. It's a little more tractable. Obviously for us, we do different suspension. We have a little different, carburetor setup. That's the biggest thing we found on pipe and silencer. You do some little mods here and there, but the base package is 125X. And the biggest difference off the showroom floor is the power valve mechanism. It's not a flywheel weight on the 125X stock. It's the power valve mechanism. It opens 500 RPM later, so it gives you a smoother, more broader. It doesn't come on as fast as a regular YZ 125, but it pulls a lot longer. So for GNCC style stuff, where it's open and fluid and you need that. One thing I really struggled with when I rode an 18, especially when you go up north, is tractability. 125s are really hard at tractability. You got no torque, so you're either spinning or you're lugging. You're bogging. You don't have any. You get in those rocks at snowshoe, and the thing's just spinning everywhere. Where the 125X seems to have a lot better bottom, to where it doesn't hit so hard right off the bottom. It kind of transfers into a smooth power. So you get a lot better, tractability. That's what I noticed the most is the tractability. The 18-inch wheel, that's kind of, some people, that's 6 in one end, half a dozen in the other. We've always liked the 18.
Mm-hmm.
Suspension, obviously everybody's different with suspension, but as far as like a guy that's looking to ride, GNCC, National Enduro, full gas, things like that, off the showroom floor, that 125X is going to be better suited. You don't have to do the suspension, you don't have to do the suspension valving to get it ready for off-road. The power is going to be smoother. I mean, the rest of the bike's very, very similar. Things the same. The suspension's the same externally. Internally it's a little different, but it's a 125, YZ 125 base with some off-road goodies, and that's what most off-road guys I know nowadays. They don't want like a slow, soggy bike. They want a moto bike with some off-road essentials.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly right, and I've been wanting to ride that bike just because I love my 125 so much. But when I had shoulder surgery, I sold both of my bikes because I knew, also like you were talking about earlier, I knew if I had them sitting out here in the garage, I was going to try to ride them way before I needed to.
Yep.
So I ended up getting rid of them, and I've regretted getting rid of my 125 ever since then. But I'm going to come out to a demo day, and I'm going to try one of the YZ 125Xs because I'm really interested in it, and I think it'd be fun to ride. And it's
125.
cool.
You know what's funny about the 125 is when I do the demos, there's not a single person that comes off, the 125 or the 125X without a smile. It's like, man, this thing is light. It's fun.
Oh yeah.
125. They're way underrated. Like, when you get on one, you think it's not going to have any power, and it's not going to have any bottom end, but honestly, like, I mean, even though they've, the motor's been pretty much unchanged for a number of years, I mean, they still are very usable. What I've noticed from myself is when you go from a, say a 250F or a 450F to a 125, the biggest changes, you got to shift that motorcycle. 125, you don't have to use the clutch. Like, people override the clutch on a 125 so much, they end up smoking them. But if you shift, you got to shift. Don't use the clutch, use the shifter. That's what I've learned. When I first started riding a 125 a couple of years ago, I was the same way. Come out of a corner and you're hammering the clutch. But if you shift down, the bike's in the power.
Mm-hmm.
So don't use that's always my my thing with Preston is don't use the clutch, use the shifter.
Interesting to note because I was one of the people a gear high.
Yeah. You gotta
my clutch.
Yeah, when you go into a corner on a 250F, you shift down one gear. 125, you shift down two. You guys, everything's more. You just shift a lot more.
See, I don't know what it is, but I love that 125, and still to this day, my best overalls at GNCC's morning races and at Mid-East, even now, 2 years later on a brand new 250F, I had way better overalls that whole year I was running a 125 than I do on my 250F, which I can't figure out.
Doesn't make sense.
No, but it happened.
125 you can flog. You can, you're not intimidated by it. It's you can throw it around. It's kind of like me when I ride a 450. I feel like the bike's kind of in control, and it's a lot to hang on to. Where you get on the 125 and you're not afraid of it. You sling it where you want it to, and you can bash it around, and it's not going to hurt you.
Exactly, and plus the suspension out of the box is so good on those things that you really don't have to worry about anything there. But so also like I said, I want to come out to a demo day and ride one of those 125Xs and the 125 back to back to see how they do, and it's cool that you kind of created that demo program. So and I'm a product of it because, as we talked about before, I mean, I was pretty much sold on getting a Honda. I had ridden some Hondas. I loved them. I was sold on it. Well, I went out to the demo day at GTR and rode the Honda and the YZ250F back to back, and was able to see the differences back to back. And that's what sold me on going to buy a brand new Yamaha, was having it accessible to me at a demo day. So that's awesome that you're able to do that, and that people are able to come out and ride whatever they want out of the whole lineup. Yeah,
it's been definitely, especially nowadays, I think, the bikes are so expensive, that people want to make sure when they get that bike and they roll it off the, showroom, I mean, that it's what they wanted. And our sport is one of the very few, honestly, one of the very few things in this industry or this, world that you can't test ride. If you want to buy a dozer, you can go, they'll give it to you for a day. And then if you like it, you buy it. Cars you test drive, ATV side-by-sides you can test drive, but motorcycles are one of the few things that you read magazines, you talk to your buddies if you can ride your buddy's bike, but there's no definite way to know exactly, what you want. And I see it every weekend, you get 5 guys that ride one specific model and they have 5 different opinions. Everybody's looking for different power, ergonomics, feel, handlebar position, seat to foot peg position. Everybody's looking for, whatever it is, whatever that feel that they're looking for. And, I feel that, we do a lot of demos, throughout the country and it's amazing to see different areas, different people like, different bikes. When you're on the East Coast, it's primarily, 250, 250F, 252 stroke, still real popular, 125. When you start going west, that's when you start seeing more 450, more 450 stuff, more open, more open type stuff. But like I said, it's pretty neat to see, the riders, like I said, not everybody likes whatever. They may ride, 4 or 5 bikes and may not like any of our bikes. But at the same time, it's to me, it's a beneficial, program just for that main reason. You want to make sure that, when you make that, $9,000 investment, this isn't a, $4,000 motorcycle anymore. You want to make sure when you get it home that that's what you wanted.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's cool, like you said, to be able to go out there and have that opportunity. And, without that,
it definitely continues to grow every year. I mean, we're to the point now where, last year we did close to 14,000 demo rides. And wow. It's getting to the point now where I don't know how to make it any, make it any bigger or do any more. I mean, cause, we're doing what I do. It's got to be on the weekends. And that's where it's a tough balance for me to be able to try to do some racing and, make sure that, I do my, do the demos and stuff is, we can't do demos on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, probably wouldn't be too big of a turnout then.
No, only a few places I can think of. Like if you go to, say, I would say Milestone before they got shut down, but you can go to, if you went out west at a, Paula or something like that on a Wednesday afternoon, you could have a pretty decent turnout, but most places that we know on the East Coast, yeah, you'd be hearing crickets.
Unless you're able to do it here soon when everyone's got coronavirus and is off work and can be at the track on Tuesday.
Yeah, there we go. Good idea. Everybody's off work and off school. Let's go track riding.
Do some demo days. But man, still making it happen, still getting back out to the races, and obviously, you've been at the first 3 rounds. 2nd place at Big Buck and a big asterisk there, and 7th at round 2, and then you cap it all off with a win yesterday in Georgia. But 2nd at Big Buck, it's got to be, I don't know how your feelings are about it, but you led, I think, all but 2 laps of that race, and the first one and the last one. But I was on my way over to the podium, or to the finish line, rather, and you and Zach both came by me wheel to wheel down pro row. So sitting there watching both of you, you're in the lead. And then from the time you get from there to the finish line, Zach had made the pass and got the win there. You got 2nd. What happened in that section of woods between pro row and the finish line?
Well, honestly, like I had, going in the 2-lap cart, I had about a, 38-second lead on Zach, and Zach's a great rider. He's strong. He's young, and I felt good. Big Buck's always been a good round, good race for me. That's real familiar conditions to what we ride in all the time. And for whatever reason, them last 2 laps, I just lost my mental my mental focus, I'll say. I started making little stupid mistakes, tip overs, and, finally one of the tip overs turned into a bent shift shaft, and I couldn't shift the bike. And, Zach caught me, and he got around me, and, he was flooring it. He had plenty of energy left. And I gave up, honestly. Like, mentally, once he caught me, I'd, kind of got the balloon popped, and it was hard that last, like I said, more than anything, it wasn't I didn't get physically tired. It was just like, when you get mentally, you're not sharp, and you just make these little mistakes and tip overs, and you're taking bad lines, and things aren't flowing, and, just stupid mistakes. And he reeled me in and passed me, and that was kind of it. But I knew, for me, that first round was really fun. Like, me and Zach rode together the first part of the race, and Zach's a good rider, and I love riding with somebody with experience like he's got. Takes good lines, is real smooth. I've ridden with him a little bit over the years. I know that he's clean, and we rode really good together there the first part of the race, and he was he was going fast. It was I was more happy than anything after Big Buck, that I was like, all right, it's been 2 years since I did this. I'm 41 now, so I was real concerned. But I'm not concerned with the experience and the line selection and things like that. It's more the speed, right? That's what you're always worried about, is do I still have the speed to run with these younger guys? And Big Buck was for me, even though I finished second, it was a confidence builder for me. I was like, all right, I know I have the speed to still run with these guys.
And is it 3 for 3 with hole shots? I didn't see the Florida.
No, I didn't get the whole shot in Florida. No. Preston's 3 for 3. She's got the whole shot every single race. She's lightning starter.
Dang. And so that was one of the things I asked you yesterday when you were waiting to get on the podium, is how in the world both of you guys get such good starts?
Just practice. I learned from Wibbly. Wibbly was kind of the master of starts. I think he got that one year, was it 14, 15? When him and Caleb were battling for the championship that year. That was the last year that Caleb lost the championship, was whatever year that was. But Paul got every hole shot, every hole shot that year.
12? 11 or 12? Caleb's won 7?
Yep. So it'd have been, maybe, it'd have been 11, 10 or 11. I can't remember. But every time when we would ride together, Paul would do, every time he threw a leg over a motorcycle, he'd do starts, repetitive starts. And, the start's a big part of the race, even though, and in reality you have 3 hours. The start is a key ingredient to how your day is going to go. You get a good start, you can control the race, you can see the pace, you stay with that, lead pack, so to speak. Where if you get a bad start, mentally it starts your day off negatively, and you're fighting all day. So that's why we've put a lot of, I've always put a lot of emphasis on, trying to get up front early, especially for me now. I know when I was, the young guy coming up, and Rodney Smith was kind of the older guy, and Fred Andrews, those guys that I were racing with, they were a little bit older than I was, and that's what they would do to me. They'd get the start, and they'd hold me back. They'd play the game. They wouldn't let me go. I couldn't get around them. They'd go really fast in the open stuff, and they'd get in the tight stuff. They'd slow down. They would control the race until they were ready to go. So for me now, it's like that's what I try to do, is try to, if I get a good start, I can control the race. Where if I'm behind, then I can't control it. And that's kind of what happened in Florida. I got a bad start, and, those guys were gone. Like, I couldn't, they were just riding. They just flustered me.
It's funny you say that, because yesterday at Georgia, and I wrote these lap times down, or not lap times, but each lap. Now, second place kind of changed a couple times throughout the race, but you get the whole shot, And then on the second lap, you were 1 minute and 9 seconds ahead of second place. Third lap, 2:39. Fourth lap, 2:55. Fifth lap, 2:51. And then you got the win by 2 minutes and 11 seconds. So, I mean, from green to checkers, you kind of didn't control pace at all. You kind of got out in front and put your head down and really gained some ground on them guys. How did that feel?
Well, I mean, Georgia's always been a good round, for me over history. I won that race in 2004, XC1. Just always felt comfortable there. I mean, it just and in this race especially, like, my plan was to execute just like I had started to execute it. So I got the whole shot, and then Jason Lipscomb passed me about a mile in, and I was content with that. I'm following in second. I've turned into a better follower than I used to be a better leader. Now I'm a better follower, because what I've learned is the younger guys have better hand-eye coordination, so they see more. They see better lines, and it's easier for me to just follow them. It takes a lot of stress off, right? From, you can attest to that. When you're following somebody, you're just keying off of them. You're not looking anywhere. You're just following that tire. So I was pretty content in second, and we came around right before the finish, and I saw Brody coming up on us. And, I've, known Brody Johnson for forever, since he was, not even old enough to ride a dirt bike. And, I could see him coming. And I know Brody's going forward, like, period. Like, he's going to pass us all. He's going, he's going to finish, top 20 overall. Mm-hmm. So when he passed us, I'm like, I felt pretty good, and I'm like, well, let's see if I want to just try to hang with Brody. And that's exactly what I did. And he literally, like, that was the reason that I was able to go, was I wasn't riding, I was just following him, like, wherever he was going. And he had, like, that's what really made, this race is what really made me realize how much faster the hand-eye coordination is on a younger person, because, like, following Brody, like, we come up on a mud hole, and he would instantly find a line and go for it, like, whether it be, like, off the trail, or maybe it was cutting across, or we had nobody pointing us lines. He was just going, and I just stuck with him. I mean, I just stuck with him the next lap and a half, and then I stopped for gas. And when I came out from gas, he didn't. I have to stop every 2 laps, where he only has to stop once. So when I stopped, I lost him, and I'm like, crap. Like, I don't want to do this for myself. Like, I don't have to key off of now. I was seriously worried. I'm like, I don't know if I could do this with myself now. Like, it was so fun following him. Like, he was taking all the chances, and he had all the stress because he was picking the lines. Well, then I went as fast. I pushed really hard. I caught back up to him, and then I got in the zone again. Just kind of followed him, and then he stopped for gas, and I got around him. And then after the third lap is when he went past me, and he was going. That's when he started flooring at lap 4, from lap 4 on. And for me, I've memorized a lot of the lines that he had taken, and a race like that, to me, like, that's like Big Buck was like that, and this race was like that, where you have to pick and choose. You can't just floor it. Where Florida, that's where I struggle, is when it's really fast and you got good traction and you just hammer the main line. Like, those guys are just they're faster. Like, I don't have that raw speed anymore. For me, it's the races that are going to be better for me are going to be the ones that you have to go at a good pace, but you still have to be smart. You can't just blow through stuff or you get stuck. Mm-hmm. So this race went, by the 4th lap. And like I said, this track's always been, I don't know what it is about it. It's always been, a good track for me. And it couldn't have been much better as far as how the race went, and, no mistakes, no problems, no getting stuck. Everything went really smooth.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because Georgia is one of those tracks, and I think Georgia more so than any other track as far as lines opening up everywhere. Like, a lot of times some of the tracks get pretty one line for the most part, but it seems like Georgia, every single year, there is 8 million different ways to take around the same exact section.
Yeah, you might come into a section behind a guy and never see him ever again. He may have gotten ahead of you. I mean, there was one section in particular. It was over by the 7, and Caleb and I were looking at it. I was biking the track, and Caleb was over there, and we were looking at this little water hole. And I mean, there was 2 lines through it on Saturday afternoon from the quad race, and by the time we got there, I mean, the track got literally 300 yards wide with 5 million lines, and then it all filtered into 2. So depending where you wanted to go, if you wanted to go in the middle and chance getting stuck, or if you wanted to jump the ditch, there was a jump line. There was all the way around both sides. It was way out of the way. But that's always been Georgia, and typically what happens, what I've learned about Georgia is the beginning part of the race, everybody starts fanning out, wider. Yep. By the last 2 laps, the middle lines haven't been used, and they're filled back in with mud and silt and sediment, and they're fine. They're good to go again. Mm-hmm. So you go back, you start going wider, and then you go back to where you started.
Yeah, I was talking to Grant, and he was saying the same exact thing before the race. He was saying how typically that's how it ends up getting, that the lines go super wide, but then by the end of the race, the lines right down the middle where everyone was riding mountain bikes before the race, those are the good lines to take. That's right. It all goes,
yeah. I mean, there was half a dozen lines that I took on the last lap that I didn't take any other part of the race because they like I said, with water being there and as they ride, the mud and the silt and they get filled back in. Mm-hmm. So it's and most of that place has a pretty good base. That's why I was really worried when it started raining. There kind of started sprinkling a little bit about midway point of the race. Once it starts raining there, it goes completely away. You remember 2014 at that track? That was mayhem. It was pouring down rain all day long. That was miserable.
Yeah, and lucky that rain missed the way that it did, where we only just got a little bit of it, or like you said, that could have gotten really rough and rowdy pretty quick.
Well, I looked at the weather report that morning. It's supposed to start raining at 1 o'clock and rain the rest of the day. Yep. Like when we were on the starting line, it should have started raining and rained all day long.
Yep.
That would have been, because that little bit of rain we got pretty slippery. Just that little bit of rain, that red clay don't take much.
Mm-mm. I think that must have been the reward from up above for being the only sport event still going on that weekend.
Right. Yeah, we'll give them a little break here.
Yeah, we said we'll revert
You've had that
this
2 years in a row there, because last year was supposed to rain there sideways too, and same thing. It turned out to be a beautiful, perfect track, and it couldn't have. Even though Georgia's always got them mud holes and springs and stuff. The rest of the track was really good shape. Good traction. Good ruts, and I think it's such a that place has always got every aspect. You got dust. Like the moto track was all dusty, and that open stuff up by the pit area was dusty. Mm-hmm. And then you drop down in the woods, and it's perfect traction. You drop down in the valleys, in the mud. It's got the 3 tiers.
And then all the pollen too.
Oh yeah. And I got home to South Carolina, and I figured we'd have a bunch of pollen. We didn't have no pollen here.
Yeah, that's the same thing here. There's no pollen at my house, but down there everything was green.
Yeah. It was all that slime, especially with that little bit of rain we had, turned into slime.
Exactly, but man, one thing I gotta ask you, it came up in the booth. I was actually in the commentary booth for the whole race, and one of the things that came up was talking about the pace that everyone is running at the GNCCs now, or the lack there of a pace, and how there used to be a time where you kind of settled down into the groove and then pushed at the end, but now it's a sprint from the beginning. Everyone is battling from the beginning. Everyone is riding as hard as they can straight out of the gate, and Yuha came up during the broadcast as mainly the guy that changed that and started sprinting from the get-go. And you in particular are a guy that was at the top of the level of the sport before Yuha, and also stayed around after Yuha. So you saw what it was like racing on the front line before, during, and after that whole transition, what would you say? I mean, how much of that change did you see happening at that time, or looking back on it now?
So I'd say, in the beginning, like the beginning part of my career, it was a trail ride till gas. So everybody just kind of rode around. I mean, everybody's riding pretty good, but they weren't really sprinting. After the gas stop, everybody started really, blowing through. Like that's when it was time to go. That was like 99. And then 2000s when Watsy came in. Then Watts came in, and he did the opposite. He would sprint as hard as he could, but he would die at the end. But he had such a big lead that he would just kind of float it in. And that was 2001, I think, when Watsy started really putting that different. He just changed the game. He didn't ride wide open the whole time, but he changed the way it was ridden. So then everybody started, like, for me, like, I feel like 2002 and 3, before U-Haul, that's when, the rest of us started, we started seeing what Watsy was doing. So then we would try to, mimic his, try to get the pace, but also, the training started getting a lot more, more important, off the bike. So in, 2002, when I was, winning, that's kind of was, that was my, my calling card was I could run, good pace in the beginning, but I never get tired. Like, for me, that was my biggest thing was I could, last 2 laps, that's when I could really, really go hard. And then when U-Haul came in, he started the whole sprint from the start to finish. There was really no pace. And then I think, in that era, you figure, Caleb and, and Thad and, these, most of the guys that are, on the front row now, they were watching him. So every generation looks at the next generation that, that they're ahead of. So the kids that are racing, B class and youth now are watching Caleb. Like, what is he doing? Like, they're mimicking that. So the next generation will, that's the beauty of sports is it's always a revolution. Somebody else will come up and do something different, because they learn off the generation. You look at motocross when Stewart first started doing the scrub, like, a lot of the current guys that he was racing against never seen it. Where now kids on, 50s are doing it.
Yeah.
It just, it elevates the game, and I think with any sport that involves money, I think that, people are willing to, to put more in, push harder, train harder. I know it's going to be, Caleb is going to be, I think he's going to be impossible to replace as far as, he's just so, watching him grow up as a kid, like when I was winning, he was on 65s or 85s, I think, and watching him grow up, like, and, what he's done for the sport and, his strengths. Like, I've always had a lot of respect for anybody that can be that successful repetitively, like a Carmichael or a Dungy or a Villapoto, to be that successful, repetitively, that takes a lot of, mental strength, like, to be able to
in anything, especially this.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3-hour races like this. There's so much that can happen. Whether it be, your machine, your body, bottlenecks. There's anything you can imagine can happen in a 3-hour race. And for him to be so strong for so long, it's pretty amazing. I mean, to know, like I could do it from when I was racing. I could do it, a few times a year, and and win some races, and but to do it over and over, I could never figure out the mental game. And even that's always been the hardest thing to figure out is your mental game. Even like this weekend, Caleb showed up to the line late. I don't know why, but he had to. He showed up to the line late, and he had to hold Rodney off from announcing him because he had to go to the bathroom, and like that would have flustered me. Like thinking to myself, like that would have flustered me because I was out of my system. But he did whatever he does and switched it over, and did what he does. He's very smart, very resourceful. There's no terrain that he hasn't figured out how to. That was even U-Haul, like U-Haul in the rocks. Like that was U-Haul's biggest, weakness was you got him in the rocks and he were watching old GNCC videos from the mid 2000s, and when we went to like the Wisp and places like that with rocks, like Yamaha was like way off the pace. So every rider has had weaknesses throughout their career. Watsy had his weaknesses. David Knight had his weaknesses. I had mine. Barry had his. Like, I think that Caleb was one of the few guys that have ever seen in this newer generation that doesn't matter. Like mud, rocks, roots, sand. He's solid.
Yeah,
Makes it tough to beat a guy like that.
And just the progression of it, and like you said, coming up through it in 7 years, he's won the championship and stayed relatively healthy throughout it all. And I know he's had a couple surgeries from a couple different injuries, but they happened at the right time at the end of the season where he already put himself in a good enough position that those injuries didn't really come into effect. Yeah,
he's it's all been he's had to work hard for it. I mean, it's been a lot of work for him. Watching him, like I said, watching him grow up. I think that he maybe not worked that hard in the beginning part of his career and just kind of did it on natural talent. And then he I know he said it a couple times, but after Paul beat him that year, like he vowed that'd never happen again. Like, I think that could have been a spark that lit the fire.
Dang. And you've kind of seen, I was a little bit late getting into it all, but you've seen Caleb come from mini bikes into being the winningest rider on bikes.
Yeah, and like I said, him growing up, like him and Thad they've been racing each other since they were little kids, and through the amateurs and through the XC2 ranks and the A ranks, Thad was always the faster of the two. They used to ride down here a lot when they were younger, and Thad was typically always the faster guy. And then once they went to XC1, like it seems like the tables have been turned a little bit where Thad or Caleb's just a touch better. I mean, Thad's been right there for a number of years, and it's pretty, like I said, the most impressive thing for me is to be able to do it, year in, year out, week in, week out, that mental intensity and aggression. That's what I feel you lose as you get older, is that ability to push to that next level that hurts. He's a machine.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can really argue that, but one thing I do want to talk to you about, and I know that we've kind of been talking for a while here, and I appreciate you taking the time out. No, it's awesome to hear the stories, and like I said, I really appreciate you taking the time out. But you mentioned the Wisp and some old VHSs and some things like that, and it made me think about the fact that I think it was a little bit over 2 years ago now, we posted on the OTP page the 03 Wisp when you and Barry came around the first corner, barely missed a kid running out onto the track, and then Randy Hawkins ended up cleaning the kid out. Luckily, he didn't get hurt, but we posted that video, and you were one of the first people to comment on it, and so I just wanted to get your full take of what you remember from that and how all that happened.
I mean, that's just like what Caleb went through. I mean, that's our sport, unfortunately. Is, I mean, you're in an open woods. I mean, people be standing everywhere, and I mean, when I've been out walking the track, on Saturday, I've almost, quad guys yell at me, get out of the way, I'm in the wrong line or whatever, and it's, I know with that race, it was, that kid started to, I guess the story is the kid started walking across the starting line. Well, GNCC is nice and quiet. There's nothing happening. All of a sudden, the roar.
Yep.
Well, when the kid heard the roar, he started walking back the other way. And he didn't realize he's in the middle of the start. Well, then we come around the first turn, and Barry and I were fighting for the whole shot. And this kid was right in the middle of the track. Well, we split him. We split the kid. He's still like a deer in the headlights, doesn't know where to go. He's trying to go left, trying to go right, in the midst of back in those days when you watch those races, I mean, there was, 30 people in the pro class.
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of that's for XC2. So you had
there was one pro class.
That's right, one pro class, and then Randy came around, and he'd gotten a bad start, but he snuck around the inside. Well, the kid had started working his way towards that way, and Randy come up on him, and Randy was really worried. Randy's always been a sportsman, first and foremost, and he slid into the kid and took him out, but he hit the brakes, so he kind of swept him off his feet. And Randy got up, kept going, and the whole lap he's thinking, man, I think I broke both these kids' legs, broke both of his legs because the way that he hit him, just slid into him.
Yeah.
And,
the kid flew pretty far, too.
Yeah, the kid it was, and after the first lap, Carrie Jo and Rita have always been, pretty mindful of that kind of stuff, because I run over a girl at Sunday Creek one time, going down pro pits. I was leading. And the girl went one way, went the other, and I clipped her with my bark buster. And the whole next lap, I'm thinking, man, I killed this little girl.
Oh, no.
But at the finish, same for Randy that year. When I went to the finish at Sunday Creek, Carrie Jo came up and said, hey, Jason, that's when we had to stop. There were no transponders. They had to go barcode. And when we stopped for that second, for Randy and myself, Carrie Jo said, hey, the person's fine. You're good. So to kind of let you, because, even though you're out there racing, when you do something like that, it kind of sits in the back of your mind, what just happened. Yeah. It takes you a little while to think about it, but then once you get about 4 miles after the fact, you think, I could have hurt this person bad. So then you're trying to race, but you're thinking about what just happened 4 miles ago. It finally sets in. At first it's no big deal. You're racing, you're going for it. But as you keep going, your mind starts unfolding this situation that just happened. And then, so it's mentally, it can be, it can be a little mentally distracting. But that's happened numerous times. I remember I was at St. Clairsville, or not St. Clairsville, it was Yerkesville, Ohio one year, and it was really muddy. They had this big hill climb there, and I come up on this hill climb, and I floored it to go up there. People were scattered everywhere along this hill. And I run this guy over, cleaned him out, just run him straight over. He's right in the middle of the trail. After the race, excuse me, this guy was pretty big too. This guy starts coming over my way. And my dad's like, oh, crap, that's the guy you hit. Mm-hmm. And I go, yep, I think that's him. He's like, well, go ahead and get in the box, fan. This guy comes up and his pants are ripped halfway off his body. And he's like, dude, that was the best thing ever. Can you sign these pants for me? So that's our GNCC family. You know what I mean? Even though they get run over, beat up, the spectator. You've been to Ironman Hill. Those people love that. It's pretty, very unique. What we, our fan base is very, very dedicated to hike out in the woods and, watch us and also to take the bumps and bruises that they encounter.
No, you're absolutely right about that. I actually, 2 years ago at Steel Creek, when Ben Kelly and Josh Toth were battling for that XC2 championship, that when you go back across to where the old start was and run that section and come back across, you come down that long straightaway before turning and going across the creek, a group of girls were cutting across the track right at that time, and I'm pretty sure, I don't remember if it was Ben or Josh, I think it was Ben though, just absolutely hit the girl square with his front number plate, as good as you can make contact. He made contact with this girl, and she went flying off the trail, and I went over, the first thing I did after I found out she was okay is I went over and told the team, I was like, hey, next lap when he pits, let him know that girl he hit was okay. And they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, he just creamed some girl over there, but I was like, she's good.
He'll know. Yeah, that means a lot. I know for me, that when I did that, to that girl in the pits, when Carrie Jo said, hey, she's okay, it was like, oh, even for you doing that for whichever one it was, Josh or Ben, when they came into pits, that would make them, it would ease their mind, because a racer's mind is especially when, you being a racer too, racers' mind is a very delicate thing when they're out there racing, and there's a lot of stuff going through there at once. And when you have something like that, it in the moment it doesn't bother you, but over a couple, 3-4 miles, that's when things start setting in, and you start thinking about what just happened. Like, shit, I could have killed this person.
Man.
Bark buster in the side of the head, or you can do some serious damage.
I would love to see the guys sign pants today.
Oh yeah, I mean that was awesome, because the guy was massive too, and I'm like, man, this guy's coming to beat me up, No, he loved it. It was the best thing ever.
Or the kid from the Wisp in 03. Wonder if he still runs across GNCC starting line somewhere.
It's a good story. I'm sure he never forget it, because we never did.
Well, man, I appreciate you a lot taking the time out
sir.
and talking with me. It's awesome to hear all the stories, and we got to get together. I got to come down there and ride and check out the place and sit down and do a little bit more bench racing with you. But
absolutely, I appreciate the opportunity. I know we've been talking about this for a couple of years now, so glad to finally get her done.
Yeah, absolutely. I finally got back and started doing it consistently. So I had a little bit of lapse there, but yeah, man, like you said, I'm glad it's finally happened. I'm glad we're finally able to get to talk. And what other rounds can we expect you at racing this year?
Well, I'm just gonna kind of go race by race. I mean, I didn't plan on going to Steel Creek, but we, obviously that race has been, canceled or postponed now, because I had a big desert race to go to and do demos out in Washington, but that's been canceled now. So that if GNCC comes up with a weekend, that weekend, I'll be there. And then, I'd really like to go to Kentucky. I like that track. That's an old track from years ago we used to do.
Yep.
I'm just going to kind of, chip, kind of keep going as we go. I don't have any plans to do the whole series, but, we'll just see, we'll just keep kind of going with the flow.
All right, well, good deal. Looking forward to it, and good luck in any future rounds you do decide to go to, and thank you once again, and awesome being able to catch up and hear all those stories from you.
All right, Tyler, have a good night, man. Thanks for having me.
Yep.